Alright, welcome back everyone to Rampancy.net's Let's Play of Mass Effect 3. We have now finished the game and I'm joined by Blackstar, as usual. And also Jillybean and Malagate, who shepherded us through. Pun very much intended.
Pun intended.
So we've assembled again. Last time we spoke was while we were playing some multiplayer to increase galactic readiness, and Jillybean and Malagate helped us out because we were Mass Effect multiplayer noobs. And at that time, we had not finished the game yet, and so we had to make that spoiler-free because Blackstar did not know how Mass Effect 3 ended. Now we have finished the game, and so I wanted us to get together again to talk about it. At first, I wanted to structure this as a question of like, well, so many people had a negative reaction to the way this game ended, so much so that BioWare actually put out some free DLC, a patch that extended their description of the ending and added in more voiceover and additional content. But I've also seen plenty of those arguments. I thought maybe instead it would be better to talk about why we liked it, because I think we all had mostly positive reactions to the ending, and I know Blackstar just did, and he was like, I don't understand what people are upset about.
But again, I am terribly ignorant of the universe. I'm sure a lot of people are like, no, you don't understand it.
But you watch this. I mean, look, I don't read the novels or the comics myself, so there's a lot of extra material that I'm also ignorant of. But I thought the ending made sense as it followed from the previous two games, and you watched me play the previous two games, and you played Mass Effect 3, and the ending didn't leave you with the same kind of disconnect that I think a lot of people did. And I know, Jilly, you also said that you were perfectly happy with the way the game ended, even before the DLC, right?
Yeah, I really liked it, and I think one of the things that I found really sort of rewarding about it was that it worked on a couple of different levels for me, but this might be me being a little bit, reading into it too much, because I haven't really seen many other people talk about it in the way that I sort of viewed it. So I don't know if I maybe just came out with completely the wrong idea, or if that actually is what BioWare were going for, and then the reaction kind of made them backpedal quite a lot, because I think the game actually tried to pull would you kindly moment, and I think it did it really well.
That comes down to the player is indoctrinated, the Shepard is indoctrinated theory, right?
Yeah, so I think Shepard is definitely indoctrinated, but I actually think the player is tricked at the end. And I don't know if you want to hear this sort of crazy theory now, or if you want to hear it a little bit later, but to me it makes a lot of sense.
Why don't we save that for a little later?
Sure.
Malagate, what was your, I guess, like a gut reaction to the ending? Like, I guess a lot of people really felt somehow they were cheated. They watched things like, the cutscene, especially the original one, that the only major difference between them was the coloring of certain effects, and maybe felt somehow that BioWare was being lazy and therefore not respecting your choices, because they say that all the players' choices over 3 games culminated in just red, blue, and green.
Right.
With no other differences. What was your reaction when you finished the game for the first time?
So I guess I want to say there was a little bit of that feeling of laziness for me, but I was less upset about that. I appreciated the choices that I got, and like canonically how they were explaining the differences between the endings. I thought they were varied enough. And it wasn't, I didn't feel like my choices along the way didn't matter. I just ended up feeling like the choices along the way that I made from game to game merely were kind of like flavor on my character, and then the 3 choices that were presented at the end were more like, hey, this is the big decision here about how you're gonna approach the story overall. So I was satisfied that I got an ending. I was satisfied in the variety of the endings, in what they meant. I was just a little disappointed in what I actually ended up seeing, because the same animations with a little bit different coloring. I was like, on one hand, I really did have my hopes up at one point for the kind of like JRPG ending where they kind of parade out all the characters that you had significant events with over the course of the game, and there's almost like a little montage of like the different little things that happen and stuff like that. I was kind of hoping for something like that, but I was okay that I didn't get it. I guess I just wanted the endings to feel a bit more differentiated than they were. But I can't say overall that I didn't feel cheated, that I was not choosing the path all along, because whenever you solve the side quest or something like that and had a particular outcome, I kind of felt like those things carried their own weight, and it didn't need to necessarily tie into the end, but some sort of acknowledgement of those things would have been nice, but it wasn't necessary for me.
I kind of agree, actually. Like, it would have been nice if they had kind of physically been different, and you were able to watch something differently. Like, I just watched the one where the last Let's Play that you did, where you were on Horizon and you had the Miranda mission.
Right. Yeah, and we kind of failed that one.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on your point of view.
And what I thought was really funny was you guys. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what was the intent? What were you going for?
But you guys were surprised that Miranda died, and I was like, how? Because in none of my games, Miranda has never died in any of my games, unless
Really?
I deliberately set out
So
to
it was
kill
a shock
her.
for you. It was like, no.
I was like, what did you do wrong?
Thank you. So did I, because it's not the fact that she died; it's the fact that she died there and then. I think was the question, because I didn't expect it. It seemed to come out of left field. And I don't know whether it's because they just wanted to curve up her story arc and that was an opportunity for it, or, like you said, I failed at something. I missed something somewhere, or we didn't have a conversation somewhere. And I don't think of conversations as, oh, you better talk to this person or they're going to die. You know? I don't think of that way.
If we do well enough in this conversation, we'll survive tomorrow, you know?
Right. I'm like, huh? No, for me, surviving is like, okay, we're in a combat situation and I need to either defeat somebody or get to somewhere. I need to flip a switch. I need to defend a person. I need to achieve an objective. I don't think, my God, I forgot to go to the lounge. And suddenly somebody's going to pay for it.
One thing I wanted to say about that aspect real quick is that whenever I'm faced with a situation like that in a game, I always get a bit of that old choose your own adventure resentment.
Yeah.
Because you choose a particular fork in your path, but then there's so much text and exposition that by the end of when that choice is explained, everything's gone off the rails, and halfway through that explanation, you're going, no. And I feel whenever that gets done, whenever that happens to me in a video game, that's the way that I feel, where it's like, well, I'm making the choice because the game is presenting me with a choice, but it's not indicative whatsoever as to how the events are going to unfold based on that choice, which I don't want to say it's disingenuous, but there's an illusion of more control than I think is intended, which feels a bit unfair.
To be honest, I think that probably sums up in a nutshell why people were angry and frustrated about stuff, because they were under the illusion that their choices did in fact matter. And when you think about it, when things are on such, large galactic scales, and yet throughout the entire series, we never get this, and I think Narc mentioned this before, we never really get the sense of we're taking part of big, tumultuous, huge battles where our decisions and strategies are affecting the outcome. We're doing these tiny little side things.
Yeah, because it's not a strategy game. I mean, it's a first-person shooter. Or third person in this case.
When people, like you said, get on those rails where suddenly they flip the page and now they have to accept the consequences, but the decision leading up to that page flip has nothing to do with what's continuing on with that. They feel like they're stuck, like they're trapped, like they're falling off of a cliff, and they have no say in how or when they're going to land. And from a gameplay perspective, because gameplay is all about control and doing things yourself, they feel betrayed and frustrated and annoyed. And from that perspective, I've been reading up on why people found the ending frustrated and didn't like it. And I'm sort of perceiving it, okay, all right, I can sort of see it from that perspective, but I never felt that personally when I was doing it, because certain aspects of it and the inevitability of it and my decisions playing, it always seemed to unfold in a certain way, and whether something didn't quite make sense to me or it was a little annoyed, it never destroyed the universe I was in. It was just one more thing that came out of left field out of 3 games where things were coming out of left field. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but I think in some ways people resented it a little bit more because Mass Effect 2, the suicide mission, actually did really, really well. You had to know the characters. You had to know that Miranda, despite the fact she was, this genetically perfect person, actually was a really poor leader. And you shouldn't put her in charge of things. You had to take these steps to various upgrades in order to make sure that certain people wouldn't die. You had to trade off loyalty sometimes. And I think and I don't think the Mass Effect 2 suicide mission is perfect, but I think people were really expecting a little bit more of that. I need to know this character. I need to know, what the consequences are going to be. And it wasn't like that at all.
Probably low camera angles of people's buttocks. I think it's going to be the consequence.
Yeah, that idea I think works really well. I think it's difficult to design in the era of walkthroughs when people almost consider it de rigueur to be playing with a walkthrough. Like when I went through these games the first times, I made the choice that I wouldn't read anything about a level until after I'd played it, to see that okay, if there was a radically different outcome that I wanted to explore, then I might go back, but I might just be happy with whatever I did in the moment, even if it didn't turn out ideally. But to talk about Miranda and some of the other character deaths, I mean, the series itself deals with character deaths in a bunch of different ways. Like you've got that first one of Caden versus Ashley, where it's very clearly signposted multiple times. I mean, they actually give you a chance to make the choice, and then they give you a chance to change your mind. And it isn't as simple as if this character is going to die, but I mean, it's heavily hinted. So you've got plenty of player agency there, right? You're really deciding, am I willing to risk the mission to save this person? Am I willing to risk these people to achieve this mission? And then you've got the Rex situation that happens just before that, where your ability to save Rex depends on a side mission you may have chosen to do or not do hours ago.
Yeah.
And that was what the Miranda one felt like, because you had to communicate with her several times, including a meeting on the Citadel, and you had to mention Kai Lang, and somewhere in there we muffed one of those things. And I think part of the problem is that my memory of playing in the game is filling in the gaps in the play that we have. So a lot of times, if we haven't done something, I still kind of remember that thing being done because of when I played it. And so I haven't been able to remind us, okay, we have to go and do this to make sure that this doesn't happen. And so, yeah, I was also surprised when she died. I'm pretty sure she didn't when I played it.
But I thought it was really interesting because I've been replaying Mass Effect 3 as well. And no matter what happens to Miranda, even if Miranda's already dead at the start of Mass Effect 3 and you get the Ori version of that mission, Tali will always be crying in the lounge afterwards. And I was watching your playthrough and I was like, that scene is actually a lot more meaningful if Miranda's dead. If Miranda's not dead, it just kind of looks like Tali's cracking under the strain, which is totally fair.
Because Oriana's... does Oriana die in that mission as well if you fail it, or does she live no matter what?
I think she can die, but don't quote me on that.
Okay, because even if she did, that wouldn't presumably mean anything to Tali. Not that I thought that Tali and Miranda were that close, but I mean, it's conceivable.
Well, Tali obviously didn't like her, but the whole respecting her and maybe the respecting being better scene, that.
Yeah, but she doesn't know. Nobody knows Oriana. Nobody on the crew has had any significant exposure to her as a character, so it wouldn't make much sense.
Well, it's funny because that exposition is one of the only ones I can recall of them actually getting feedback, because the one thing that you didn't really get a lot in the social spaces is you always had single either one-on-one conversations or you were in briefings. You were either having one-on-ones with characters through your vid phone, one-on-ones on the Citadel, or there were a couple moments where you were together in the same room, but you were still playing off in single aspects. There wasn't a lot of side conversations that people have in normal social situations. Like you could be talking in an office meeting and next thing you know, you're having a conversation about the same person you just had with a water cooler with a coworker. You know what I mean? And those kind of things, where you got feedback about the other characters, wasn't really there. So that particular scene where she tells you how she feels about someone else, I don't remember there ever being another scene like that in the game. Does anyone else? Yeah, so no, I mean that's kind of telling, and you're getting the perspective of a character that you don't play about other ones that you play with, and that I was like, wait a minute, she thinks she's a bitch? Why does she think she's a bitch? And then she explains to why and what happened and all of that. So that I think was kind of interesting, and I kind of wish that there was more of it, because that's a reflection of from another perspective and another experience within it. And I think if there were more of those, where people, you know, quote unquote, talked about each other behind their backs, the way that you know, people do in 90210 episodes and soap operas and things. But it does change a dynamic if it was there. You know, it gives you other thoughts about it, and it colors it more. So
I think a lot of the character interactions are also done presupposing the possibility of player romance. And so there are a lot of scenes that are meant to be kind of heightened importance because it's possible that you have a relationship. And then I think that they probably end up making this decision now. You know, there are some scenes, some conversations that only take place if a player romance is occurring. And then there are other ones that you could look at differently if there is or isn't one. And they decide, well, we're not going to cut that. We're not going to make it, you know, you can't reduce all the interactions between the characters to this is your romance target and everybody else is just silent. So there are a lot of these scenes that take place with characters that you don't have a relationship with, but that would be more significant and would make more sense if there was.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Garrus is a really good example of that, because I think Garrus is a great character, but he's not the kind of person that I would be friends with.
Really?
And yet no, he bugs me.
it's the mandibles, isn't it?
Well,
it's the mandibles.
I could see that. And when we started redoing this, because there are certain tropes in drama that I just don't like. And one of them is this idea of the tough cop who could do a better job if only there weren't so many rules.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't like that trope. But something about the Garrus performance, at least in the first few times we'd gone it through, it got past that for me. And I only started to notice it when we did this series of playthroughs, that I'm like, oh wow, he's still that. Again, he's, you know, Garrus is Dirty Harry. He's this guy who wants to find out for himself who the crooks are and shoot him. And then of course he goes to Omega to be Archangel, and that's exactly what he does. He's a vigilante.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating because all the way back, I mean, talking about choices that don't matter, all the way back in Mass Effect 1, you can convince Garrus that no, the rules are a good thing. You've got to go and you've got to, you know, put your shoulder to the grindstone and really make sure that, or millstone, whatever that phrase is, and you know, you've got to work with the system. And Garrus is like, oh yeah, fine. You can convince Caden, for example, to become anti-alien, and he will. You can change lots of people's opinions in Mass Effect 1.
Do you know this because you did it, or because you also read walkthroughs?
Because I also read walkthroughs.
Okay.
I am a pure Paragon, Caden romancing, pro-alien person who never experiences any of this through her own playthroughs. But I've seen on YouTube other people have done it. But none of those choices actually got reflected into Mass Effect 2. It was almost like once Mass Effect 2 started, there was this character reset button, and nobody's characterization moved
did you go
forward.
as Femme Shep, or did you go as Male Shepherd? Femme Shep. Okay, all right. That explains the Caden romancing. Because
and Malagate,
and also because Caden is the best video game character of all time. My space husband, please.
I'm sorry, Malagate's microphone seems to have had a malfunction. We're gonna try to repair that real quick. Because it's funny because there was a lot of dislike. I don't want to say hatred, but I want to say dislike of both Caden and Ashley. From Mass Effect 1, from what I understand, that a lot of people don't like them either at all. And I didn't like... I was curious about Ashley, because I remember our playthrough on Mass Effect 1. I was curious about Ashley when we first met her. I thought that she was going to be one of those where you had to protect her and make sure that she survived later on through the rest of the games. And then found out, you know, from that line she said, you know, I can't tell the difference between the aliens and the animals. And that was like, wow, you are a serious racist.
Yeah. I disliked Ashley, but at least that's an emotional reaction.
It definitely was one, but it just kind of hurt that character felt that way, and I didn't get the sense that she had changed that perception throughout the rest of the game at all, or there was some moment and suddenly she becomes a specter and has an incredible amount of authority. I was like, wow, they gave that job to her. I mean, it seemed rather odd throughout the whole story, because a lot of things about this was the changing and the evolving and the choices and the decisions and all of that. But there were certain characters that I didn't see evolve or grow or change over the time. And I think, again, it's because of a lack of certain exposition or certain scenes or exposure. But yeah, Caden the Roman. I mean, we let Caden die pretty early, didn't we? I mean,
well, I mean, end of the first game. The Vermeer.
It was so long ago for me.
It's like the 2/3 point.
You know, I hadn't really thought about him twice.
I'm so disappointed.
So,
okay, so Malagate, sorry, we've been talking over you for a while. How do you fall on the Caden versus Ashley thing? Which
I thought they were both the most boring out of any character that you could get.
I think Jilly just thinks he's cute.
Out of any party member. And that's fine. It's totally, it's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Neither one of them. They were both just very bland. All of the non-Shepherd human characters were super
really?
bland for me. And
Yeah.
I was always,
and that goes into Mass Effect 2 as well, because Jacob is also really, really bland.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't even remember his name, but I was just like, yeah, that other human guy, like replacement human.
Are you human 3 or human 4? I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Right. And I did play I played all the way through with the traditional like default Shepherd, and then I played through 1, and I think I got all the way through. Yeah, I played through 1, 2, and I got to just the first chunk of 3 with the Fem Shep, and all the human characters were by far they were just not very interesting to me. They were just relatively boring. So
yeah, and the thing I think why we gravitate a little bit more towards the Miranda and Ashley axis as opposed to the Caden and Jacob, aside from gender, which is probably a huge factor.
Or just one?
two things, but for me, it's is that they gave the female characters, they gave Miranda and Ashley tangible flaws, right? They've given this xenophobia to Ashley, which in the context of the story, there are obviously other characters who feel that this is justified. You know, when you come to
sure.
what happens to Udina, and Miranda is just kind of self-interested and arrogant. and if I had to say if I had to say something about Jacob, well, he's dutiful. He's a dutiful soldier. What do I say about Caden? I don't even know. So I guess, Jilly, I'm going to have to ask you, what is it that you liked about Caden? What makes him the best character in video games?
What's the attraction?
Caden has he has this brilliant line of dialogue quite early on in Mass Effect 1 where he says something like, Shepard doesn't need to put him back together because he's already put himself back together. And he's a really, I can't think of another video game character, or indeed a video game romance, where you've got the male character is an adult. He has pulled himself together. He's been through some shit in his past. He's a very, very controlled character who then sort of has to go through this. Oh, am I going to sleep with my commanding officer? Am I not? And has this very very principled stand to things. And one of the best things about it, in my opinion, is that when you get to Mass Effect 2, he's furious, and he does not come, and Ashley does as well. But I feel like the rest of the Vermeer survivor romance is written for Caden. Like, Caden is the kind of principled guy who would not come with you on Horizon no matter what, because he's just not going to work for Cerberus. He's the kind of guy who's done all these other spec ops missions and has become a major in the meantime, and is going to be a Spectre because he is a more experienced soldier. Ash is a xenophobic hating person who she would join Cerberus.
Her reaction doesn't make sense. You almost think she'd be in Cerberus ahead of you, that she should be there waiting for you. And it kind of doesn't work as well when she's like, yeah, I'm racist, but man, that's you've gone too far.
Yeah, too far over the racist line.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make it as nearly as much sense coming from her. I admit that.
I find it a very grown up relationship between Shepard and Caden, and he's a very sort of self-contained character, which is not the kind of character that you get a lot. Actually, who he reminds me of is, did you ever play Assassin's Creed 3? And Connor was the assassin in that, and nobody liked him.
No, the only Assassin's Creed game I've played is the first one.
Yeah, I would say Connor's almost similar because, again, he's quite reserved, and maybe it's just not a character that plays out very well for most people, but I really like that I like the hidden depth. What can I say? And he's pretty cute as well.
Oh, see, I knew it. It always comes down to cute. It always comes down to cute.
The only line of his I can even remember, I think, is from the very beginning of Mass Effect 1, because he's actually, and I don't think they ever put in there again, he's sitting in the deadhead seat next to Joker in the ship, and I think they were talking to Anderson over the comms, and Joker made a crack about Anderson being angry, and then Caden basically says, no, only when he's talking to you.
Don't blame me. The captain's always in a bad mood.
Only when he's talking to you, Joker.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of funny, but I gotta admit that if you had to ask me about a Caden line, I think that's probably the only one I can even remember.
Oh, I could come up with so many.
You know, he didn't make enough of an impression on me to make sure that I went around and talked to him after every mission. But like the first time I played Mass Effect 3, I talked to everybody I could find after every mission. And I think either I just don't remember what he said, or he just dropped off the rota for me for after a while, where I was always going back to Liara and Tali and Rex, and Garrus, every time to see, is there anything new? I want to know what they think about that.
Here's the thing. Is that because for Jilly, he's a romance option. Rex is interesting because he's a major component, and the other female characters are potential either A, more social, or B, romance options, because I, myself personally, I didn't go for any of the romance options. I didn't want to go through that path, because for this type of game and for what it is and for what people are doing, I always felt like, okay, we're saving the galaxy, people. We got things to do. Let's focus on some stuff.
Yeah, cool the hormones.
Oh, I think you got the wrong idea of the Mass Effect games. It's basically a romance simulator, is it not?
But see, that's just it. Everyone does. And I'm like, excuse me, we got things to do. Can we worry about this later? Because for me, it's a distraction. It kind of would.
It's a harem. Yeah, Mass Effect's a harem game.
Yeah, it's like people painting themselves into social corners and limiting options, because now we're romancing a character. Now we care about whether they live or die. Now we got to do all these different things. And I felt that okay, that's forcing me down a track that I may necessarily want to go, or it may limit my options later on, because it's like, hey, galaxy saving, kind of important. And there are several moments through the game, both physically and story-wise, where they give you the sense of urgency, where you've got to hurry up and do things, like there's pressure to do stuff. And then along the way, it's like they slow it down, or the pace is artificial. And with the social aspects for caring about certain characters, did you felt, because I wasn't sure if Jilly and Mal and Narc, if all of you had romanced certain characters in those storylines or the story arcs, did you feel a certain sense or a different perspective based on the character you romanced? Because the interest and the focus, like you said, for Narc, Caden, you didn't care about. Jilly and Mal, did you feel the same way, that there were certain people that were more important to you because either A, you romanced, or B, they were more interesting than others?
I definitely grew attached to certain characters, particularly ones that I had romanced. But in terms of like outright gameplay, like it wouldn't affect whether or not I took them on a mission with me or that kind of thing, because a lot of time it was frankly just, hey, I haven't used this person's powers in some time, and that sounds like a fun thing to do. If I ever got into a situation where it looked like I was going to lose that character that I romanced, I would like reload a save and like make sure that I made the right decision to keep them alive.
It did affect it then. Okay, it's like, no, I like this person. I don't want them to die. I'm going to put them back in the box.
And one of the only things that I was really disappointed about with my playthrough, which is something I've always wanted to go back and do, was somewhere along the line, I think in both playthroughs, I think that I've done a lost Jack at some point at the end of 2. Yeah, and I was always disappointed that I didn't get to go. Whatever I needed to do to navigate the path to romance Jack, I had wanted to do that, and I never did.
Oh God, really? The one you don't take to mom, you wanted to romance Jack.
Well, yeah, because I saw it as a challenge.
As a challenge. Wow, that's a hurdle I really want to jump. Seriously, I'm sorry. I'd be too worried about the hardware.
So that was a little bit of authentic difficulty.
Not to mention in the dark, it'd be like she's camouflaged with all the tats. I don't think I'd be able to find things.
So wait, you mean, so what, did she die in the suicide mission? Is that what you mean? Or
honestly, I don't remember. It was somewhere near the end. I want to say it was somewhere in the suicide mission. I think that's what happened.
she can die, I think. Both of the loyalty mission things like that and that one are, is that when the conflict comes between two of the characters, like between Tali and Legion or between Miranda and Jack, if you side wholly with one or the other, it kind of undoes the advantage you get from doing the loyalty mission and makes that character eligible to die.
I think that is exactly what happened, because I know that I romanced Miranda the first time through, and Jack ended up dying, and I was so heavily favoring her because she was my romance character. So I guess that actually answers your question perfectly, because that loyalty came into play there, and it ended up having that.
Okay, so that was definitely
outcome.
a factor. So now you were a big Miranda fan then. You romanced her, obviously, and did she live or did she end up dying?
No.
Oh, okay.
She ended up living at the end.
Now,
of my
did you change things to make sure that happened, or did it just that's the way that it went?
No. That once I knew that she was going to survive too, then I think it was. I just kind of rode that all the way through. After that, I didn't have to go back and change any. I didn't end up having to change any outcomes or anything.
Most of the character interactions basically work in the way that if you take every opportunity to interact with that character, then that character can live. It's just when you ignore people that they can die. So when you prefer somebody else. So in this case, basically, I think I know that we had interacted with Miranda, I think remotely a couple of times, and I think we just forgot to go look for her on the Citadel the last time before we went to do that other mission, and that was why she.
So you're saying the Mass Effect characters are just like your fish. If you ignore them, they die.
Yeah, for me, I romanced Liara in Mass Effect 1, Garrus in Mass Effect 2.
Hey now.
So you've got a thing for aliens.
Oh, come on. Growing up in 60s Star Trek, it was all about having sex with hot alien women. Kind of a running theme.
Heck, if there'd been a Krogan option, I probably would have taken that. I figured, look, it's a sci-fi fantasy. Why do the boring thing?
Something tells me that you will be able to romance a Krogan.
Probably.
I'd be worried about all the kids. I mean, apparently they pop them out a lot.
I do think the whole character design of the Asari is a little bit of a cheat, but maybe we can talk to that later. One thing that I wondered about was whether or not some players were reacting negatively because the ending that they had thought they were working towards the whole series, the game kind of tells them that that's bad because you get access to each of the three main threads of the ending based on your readiness ratings, right? So if you don't do enough side missions, if you don't do any multiplayer, so if your readiness rating is too low, the only ending thread you can choose is destruction. Right. And because it's the lowest, the cheapest available option, and because all of the other aspects of that ending are bad, I can see a lot of players saying, wait a minute, I don't understand. We're at war with the Reapers. Now you're telling me I've won the war, but that's the bad ending? And then you get access, when you move up a few thousand points from there, you get access to control, which was what the Elusive Man wanted to do. And hey, that's even better, right? I mean, instead of just breaking this thing, I beat it and I take its powers. You're telling me that's bad? How do you guys think about that? And then I've also heard people say that the synthesis ending is presented as being the best possible because it's the hardest to get. But in that one, instead of just deciding to finish the war that everybody seems to be on board with, you're saying, no, we're not going to beat those enemies. We're going to become one with them. And I'm not going to ask you guys about it. It's just going to happen.
So this is Mass Effect's "Would You Kindly" moment, okay? And you've outlined it perfectly. The whole 3 games you've been trying to destroy the Reapers, and I think there's possibly, if you go in there with something like a galactic readiness of less than 2,000, I think sometimes you die before actually getting to the catalyst. But most of the time, you will always be presented with that destroy option.
Yeah.
Therefore, all of the logic of gaming, all of the rules that we have lived our gaming lives by tell us that that is the least valuable option. Never mind that it's what you want to do. Never mind that it's, it's your character's motivation, it's your player motivation. The rules of gaming say that must be a bad option. Furthermore...
But you could see lots of people going into cognitive dissonance just at that moment, saying, wait a minute.
Yeah, Furthermore, the whole 3 games have taught you that, red is renegade.
Yeah.
It's anything coloured red is about being a bit of a maverick. It's, nobody really is expecting to save the world with a renegade interrupt. That's punching the reporters. That's not saving the world. And then
shooting the elusive man to save Anderson is a renegade interrupt, though. I find that they're really inconsistent with those things.
That's sometimes, it's whether you accept one be good, other be bad, as a.
Well, it's supposed to be ruthless versus compassion.
Yeah.
But yes, a lot of people do collapse that down into good and bad, and that I think is a mistake. When the red destruction engine is presented, the image they choose to present that is Anderson. Anderson is the military leader. He wants a military victory, and he's going to get it this way. And the control ending is with the elusive man, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to subvert and control.
Yeah. And it's presented with the paragon color, with the sort of the level-headed color. And that's sort of like, okay, so this must be the more rule-following kind of thing. And then, and this is what happened the first time I played through, and I got to the end, and then I was given this third option, which was, I'd worked so hard. I was the best player. I had done all of those choices.
You knew it was coming, right? You didn't end up falling short on points the first time through. So you knew about it, right?
Yeah, no, the first time through I got it. I had a high enough galactic readiness. I went in there and then it was the way it's presented is really obvious. It's like, this has never happened before. This is this brand new thing. And you're like, oh, it's rare. Anything rare in video games equals special. This must be the one I need to take. Never mind that ethically I'm not really comfortable with it. Never mind, the fact that it's actually kind of more what the Reapers have wanted to do. But it's the rare thing. So that's the one I went and chose, and I did it. And you get this ending, and I was like, fair enough. I've done okay. I went and I slept on it, and somebody in the forum said something like, you realize that what you really wanted to do was destroy. And I sort of thought, yeah, actually, I think ethically my shepherd wouldn't do that. She would go and destroy. So I rolled that save back, and I went and I chose destroy instead. And then it suddenly clicked that not only had Shepard been indoctrinated, but the mechanics of the game had been set up to lead me away from the ending that I actually wanted. And I, as a player, had been tricked by the Reapers. And what really drove that home for me was that if you do destroy with a high enough galactic readiness, Shepard wakes up in the ruins.
Right. Yeah, that's the only, I think we talked about that a little bit, that there's only one ending in the whole matrix of possible outcomes where Shepard lives.
He/she survives.
But it was a destroy ending, not control or synthesis.
Yeah. If the thing is that Shepard is this hero. No matter how you play Shepard, you've always been told that Shepard is this hero. So Shepard is always going to win. There's always going to be a destroy option because that's winning. It's just getting the destroy option that A, allows Shepard to live, and B, that you choose even when it throws up all of these red herrings to try and sort of distract you. And I love it. I think it was a really clever way of trying to use the rules of gaming against you and confuse the player to choose something that that you don't actually want because it's supposed to be better. And actually there's this little hidden ending, which is, this is actually really what you wanted, and here's your reward is your Shepard survives and gets to go and be with Caden for the rest of her life. So
see, I looked at it, I think the problem with a lot of good science fiction, right, is that you can read it on multiple levels, and each two of those levels is one, the surface level, right, where this is exactly what's happening, right? There are ancient alien machines that are harvesting us to avoid this unavoidable conflict between organics and synthetics.
Which has been going for
But then
countless cycles. I mean, they say that many times.
But then there's a
all of this has happened before, and all of this will
and I
happen
think that
again.
inevitability is a factor a lot of people either ignore or aren't paying attention to. But
but then there's the other level where it's like, okay, conflict between alien species and conflict between organics and synthetics is just a metaphor for cultural, racial conflicts in the current modern world. And I kind of took the synthesis ending as a science fiction fantasy version of the idea that more intermixing of races and cultures is necessary for improved understanding and for ultimate peace, because conflict comes from the instinct of drawing borders, maintaining group boundaries, and saying, we're in this group, you're outside that group, because the next thing you do is you get into conflict with that other group. And again, the big problem with that, of course, is that because the way they set up, the way the plot works, there's no way for this to be a choice the group makes. It's only made by Shepard in that one moment. You decide for everybody, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Both of those big endings that way to me seem very almost totalitarian, because there's no consensus. It's all, this is my being Shepard. This is my decision. I'm gonna choose the outcome here, and all of sentient civilization is going to have to live with the repercussions of my choice.
Deal with it.
Yeah, it's just that the destroy ending is a choice that everybody's been on board with. I mean, the big problem, even the first couple of games, is that people deny the existence of the Reapers. Having acknowledged their existence, most people are on board with attempting to destroy them if they can. The sole voice of dissent really there is Elusive Man, who says, no, we should take their power from them. We should control them. Yeah,
but he's clearly been indoctrinated himself. He's fighting it the same way that you saw Saren fight it in Mass Effect 1. You can talk the Elusive Man down in the same way, and he kills himself in the exact same way that Saren kills himself.
Right. The question that the player indoctrination leads me to, though, is the idea that if the player's indoctrinated, then the player's indoctrinated regardless of which of the three endings they choose, right? So that means that whichever one you choose isn't the one you wanted, it's the one that, I mean, are you saying that in-game the Reapers have indoctrinated Shepard, or that BioWare has indoctrinated you as a purchaser of this product?
Both.
To think that the synthesis ending is the better one, because the problem I have with that is that if it's the in-game one, that means that whatever you wanted to do, that's what the Reapers wanted you to do. And I could kind of see that for Control and Synthesis, but I'm not sure how it works into Destroy.
If you choose Destroy, if you are given all of these options and you choose to Destroy, which is the most basic option, you're going against what the Reapers wanted Shepard to do, and you're going against what BioWare tried to trick you, the player, into doing. You're making the actual organic choice.
But if you're indoctrinated, you can't, again, because Anderson tells Elusive Man, you're indoctrinated. Shepard tells him the same thing. Elusive Man is saying, I'm going to do Control. I'm going to do it. And then Anderson and Shepard both tell him, like, you may say that, but you actually can't. You won't be allowed to do it, because everything else you've done up that you think is leading up to this has actually been in service to something else. He believes that he's been fighting for the option to control the Reapers. And in reality, the Reapers indoctrinating him have just been using him to weaken the other side in the conflict. And if it comes up to him being there to try and push the button, he wouldn't have been able to do it.
See, I would say that the Reapers are actually in a really weak position. When you get to the Citadel and the Catalyst, the Reapers know that you have the power to destroy them. And that's what they're going to fight to try and make you not choose that.
Really?
They can't. Yeah.
Even though we get told that this is the first time it's happened?
Yeah. That is.
Okay. I gotta admit, I never even considered that. I kind of thought that at this point, Reapers all think it's business as usual, right? I don't know what they know about the Catalyst and the Crucible and all these other...
I think they made the Catalyst, or they certainly infected the Catalyst. So the Citadel was created by the Reapers, I imagine that the reason why the Citadel is needed for the catalyst is to use the Reaper's own technology against them. So when that little projection of the child is the Reaper's, it's trying to make you do anything so that you don't destroy it. But that destroy option is always going to be there because that is actually what you always set out to do. Shepard can't lose. You know, even if you do really, really badly, you actually can't lose because Shepard is this amazing character. And what I think is also really lends a bit of strength to this is the destroy option is also, everyone that we've seen who's fought indoctrination has shot themselves in the head. Darren, the elusive man, and the destroy ending is the one that uses a gun.
Yeah.
You know, the other endings are about melding, about flinging yourself off of high ends into big beams of light. But the destroy ending is the thing that the Reapers don't seem to be able to fight very well, and that's shooting and destroying.
I don't know. They seem really good at that. The way I looked at it, I guess, is that I still find it a weakness. I mean, shooters are very interesting, but the shooters that I find the most interesting are the ones where you spend the least time shooting, where you have that whenever there's shooting involved, it's because you've made a positive choice to start shooting, or someone else has made a positive choice to start shooting, but it shouldn't be the only way to resolve anything. So that when I get to the end there, and there are 3 endings, and there's one of which is, I interact with this object, use gun on man, just like I do everything else.
Yeah.
I want to reduce Shepard to a character in an FPS. I'm going to turn Shepard into the Master Chief, which is the only way I know how to interact with ending is a gun. I mean that.
Well, there are switches.
I wanted no part of that ending.
Yeah, because that's the rules of gaming, right? The rules of gaming say to you that using a gun is the least interesting option. So of course that's the ones that the Reapers don't want you to take, that BioWare wants to trick you as a player. They make that destroy option so unappealing on so many levels.
Do you think the Reapers are evil?
I think it's a sort of a blue and orange morality thing. They just don't have the same directives as us.
Because I got to admit, although you do come into direct conflict with them repeatedly throughout the series, I guess I always felt more interested in the conversations where you were kind of asking, hey, what's up? What is it you things are up to? What do you want? And they're like, you're too dumb. You can't understand it, And my answer to that was like, I didn't want to shoot them. I wanted them to tell me what was up, I mean, and I guess I was hoping for the game to come to the point where we were a big enough threat that they would answer me when I asked. And that's why I kind of felt satisfied by the way we got the ending. Okay, having it show up as a hologram kid, maybe a little bit cheesy, gives people bad flashbacks to Contact, whatever. I understand, but it didn't put me off the way some people I think were put off by it.
No, it didn't put me off at all, and I also actually really liked the fact that the kid was in your dreams.
Really,
at the end of each major mission, you got this little sort of. You got this insight into how Shepard is feeling.
Do you think the scenes with the kid play better for a femme shep than for a male Shepard?
No, I don't think so. I think
for me exactly the way that they had intended, where it was really more of a protective instinct that was sort of like feelings about humanity in general. And like the whole ad campaign and where the ad campaign came from, right? The whole thing about there was some like Nixon era political ad or something like that, and they were warning about the dangers of nuclear warfare or whatever. And there was a little girl playing with
it was the Goldwater ad, wasn't it?
Right, yeah, exactly. The Goldwater ad. And then they had in the Mass Effect 3
the kid
promos,
with the little spaceship
right. And so that I knew about the Goldwater ad, and I knew what that marketing was aimed towards, so that was very much the mentality that I was looking at the game with. And so immediately when that little kid showed up, I was like, well, I don't exactly know what this means, but I know for sure that I'm supposed to feel protective of humanity as a whole when I look at this kid. And so all of that spoke very much to me, at least as I believe they intended. And there's no gender strangeness or anything like that for me.
For me, the little kid character scenes with a femshep seem to make more sense, or at least instinctively for me had more of an impact. A lot of times during this, I I noticed scenes that would make a lot more sense with a male character there, especially some of the quibs and interactions between female characters where they seem to be coming on to you.
Because they're coming on to you. I mean, they don't have to come on to you or not because of your gender.
No, I know, but it's just that if there was a male Shep there, that scene just, to me, made a lot more sense the way that the tone was. And I think for the little kid character running around, the tone of it had far more of an emotional impact for a female shepherd going after him than I think a male would.
Just to bring this up, because I know that the other, I don't think it happens in any of the Mass Effect games, but in the other games that they make, the Dragon Age games, when people started to bring up these questions of, hey, why can't I romance character X? In other words, like, why can't I do a same gender romance? Why can't I do this? Why can't I, aliens, robots, whatever else?
People just want everything. That's why.
so then they actually put in characters in some of the Dragon Age games where there are characters who have homosexual orientations, who they are men, and if your player character is a man, they will proposition you and you will lose reputation with them if you refuse them. And that just drove some people bonkers. That drove them nuts. It was this, I'm a guy and a dude comes on to me and then I refuse him, which is normal, and he gets pissed.
Yeah, the character shouldn't get pissed. That's really bad.
Yeah. So anyway, going back to something we said earlier, which was kind of about player agency and playing a character, the difference between a Western RPG where it's kind of you're assumed that you get to determine everything about your character, their name, their class, their attributions, their appearance, and that character is an avatar for you to control and to dictate to, versus the JRPG where they basically say, here's a story, it involves these characters. Maybe you get to choose which one, but probably not. And they just give you a character who's preformed, who has a backstory and a name and a gender and an appearance. And your job is to role play that character, is to kind of do what it seems that character should do. And one of the things that I told Blackstar when we started, because I kind of did this as a big experiment to see what his reaction to the ending would be. But I also felt that it required some prep and some contextualizations. And so the way I explained that was,
well, everything does.
Instead of you trying to pretend like you're Shepard, basically pretend like Mass Effect as a game is kind of like shooting a movie. There's already a script. You can improvise a little bit, but there's a script. And Shepard is a character who's played by an actor, and that's not you. You're the director giving line readings to the actor, and you're kind of nudging them this way or that based on what your interpretation of that character is.
So I really like that idea, and that's so. How old is Mass Effect? 10 years now. So when
over, I think.
No, 2007, the first one came out. So yeah, the original is 10 years old now.
Oh, okay. So 10 years exactly.
Okay, so 10 years. So, I mean, obviously, because I'm 21. Sorry, the doorbell's going there. I'll be back in 2 seconds. Continue this line of thought.
Again?
Yeah, well, how do you feel about that? Like, for instance, do you play a lot of other RPGs? Are they more the Western kind or Japanese ones? How do you fall on? Do you wish your character to be a blank slate on which you project yourself, a la Master Chief? Or do you like a game that gives you a character who has a nature that you adapt yourself to?
I think I have a hard time with the latter. I think for the most part, that's the way that I tend to play RPGs. Is even if it's the older style in the JRPGs where you've got a lot of characteristics, I still kind of play it with my own sort of flair or intent. For me, it's always very much the kind of, I don't want to say impose, but basically carve out my character's personality based on what I would want to do in a given situation. It's a Western RPG, obviously, but Skyrim was the most recent RPG that I've put my hands on, and I am still in the middle of my first playthrough of that ever. But yeah, that's very much the way I play that, in terms of how I interact with everything and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I kind of make up a story in my own head, and in that sense, there's no real direction. There's no prompting that says, oh, you ought to do it this way or that way.
No, there's just prophecy. In other words, there's a role. Right. I mean, you get these prophecies. You're basically, all the Elder Scrolls games are the same, right? You start out as a prisoner who's the subject of a prophecy. You have a thing that you're supposed to do, maybe a big choice that you're supposed to make, a role that you're supposed to play, but they don't say anything about what the character is like as a person. You are allowed to define that however you like, as little or as much as you'd like. Buy a house, get married, be a herbologist, or just go around killing things. It's up to it's up to you, and everything in between. Be a thief, be an assassin. Obviously, Commander Shepard doesn't have those kinds of options. It's not an open world game.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that type of game. Well, it's funny about choices and everything, and something that kind of touched on the triple ending option, that and not being a part of the gaming community and the fan base at the time. Because there's a lot of things that you really got to take it at the time it was presented, because a lot of these people who were playing it and had only gone so far and only had one ending and was terribly annoyed with it, and then there was like the DLC to kind of help out for it and whatnot. But at the time, people had gone off saying that, oh, no, we promised we're not going to get the ABC ending, and then everyone got the ABC ending. So that, I think, a lot of fans were very, very betrayed by. I didn't have that experience. I didn't have the expectations of any particular one in either direction. I didn't expect or felt like somebody promised me something that I didn't get. So I don't know how much that of a factor kind of colored people as far as those decisions and whatnot.
I was trying to point out to you all the same signposts that I had noticed that seemed to me to be leading up to the kinds of endings you would get. Like for instance, when Sovereign is talking to you about how small you are and how long this has been going on and all these kind of stuff. I kind of read into that the idea that you couldn't have a true destroy victory that would be worth anything. And even then,
you kind of hinted that throughout.
And even then, what they suggest to you is the Reapers are an imperfect solution to this problem that keeps cropping up, which is that synthetics and organics will always come into conflict, and one will always destroy the other. And in which case, in the Mass Effect universe, I think you just have to accept as given, which is they say it is the nature of this universe that synthetics destroy organics, that the conflict...
Yeah, and most people don't. That's the thing. They point to the Geth and say, look, we already solved the problem. We stopped fighting with the Geth. We won. And I'm like, no, that's not it. You're looking at it too small of a scale. And I think that's another big aspect that a lot of people either didn't like or didn't enjoy or just didn't accept or take as read, that the scale of this is so big and so long and so old that it is inevitable. It is a rock rolling down a hill. And people didn't like that.
It's the same reason why people, including myself, didn't like the end of the Matrix series.
Well, I didn't like it because I basically thought that Zion should have been another Matrix, but never mind that. I know, because there were some people who looked at it and say, look, I shouldn't have to choose between those options because I just brokered peace between the Geth and the Quarians, and that proves it's possible.
Right,
and I was like, man, that was so damn hard, and that's just going to come up again. You can't keep doing that. It's not going to work. So...
And that's right. That's just started. Yeah, literally that, like, okay,
the destroy ending is bad because all it does is it kicks the can further down the street. It basically just means,
No, the destroy ending gets rid of the Reapers who are guiding the evolution of life in the galaxy. Shepard says it herself, they've never been allowed to develop artificial intelligence at their own pace. And the one that you do nurture throughout the whole game is Edie. And she sort of decides quite close to the end, she says that she's seen something that she doesn't understand. And it's people sacrificing themselves in the Reaper internment camps. And she decides, she's like, actually, I'm going to modify my programming because my friends are more important than myself. And that's the only AI that's kind of been allowed to develop at its own pace. And
see, I don't know, and I'd have to dig. See, the thing that I took away, especially from the Leviathan DLC, is the idea that there really were kind of two cycles, right? There's the set of cycles that we're in now that the Reapers explained to us that this is what happens. We guide organic evolution down these paths. We wait until synthetic evolution reaches this point, and then we do the reaping to prevent the inevitable conflict. We preserve the supposed biodiversity of the organics in the form of Reapers, and we reset to an earlier phase until it advances and happens again. But the Leviathan DLC and what the kid says, at the final sequence seems to indicate that there's an older set of cycles before that, which was that organic life would arise, would create synthetic life. There would be inevitable conflict, and the inherent, which we have to take as read from that character saying it, meaning it being that it's true, that the inherent superiority of synthetic life will always lead them to be inevitable, eventual victors in that conflict. And that what happened then is that the organic species that was the template for the Reapers gave to this AI that's in the Citadel, kind of like what's the name of the AI that betrays the Forerunners in Halo? What was it?
Guilty Spark?
No, the older one,
Petulant Tangent?
Oh, I can't remember. It's really annoying.
Mendicant
somebody
Bias.
Google it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's it,
that they wanted Mendicant Bias to solve this problem with the Flood, and it came up with a solution they didn't like. So just like what happened here, the Leviathan DLC tells us that this AI created a solution to the problem, and the problem is you're the problem. I'm going to destroy you, turn you into machines, and that solves my problem. So
I think that's why the Edie conversation is so important, though, because it's, she has that realization and she chooses not to preserve artificial life. She chooses to preserve.
But the fact that one AI is able or willing to make that choice, to me, doesn't destroy the inevitability of the conflict any more than the fact that you're able to make peace between the Geth and the Quarians doesn't mean it's solved forever. So to me, when I looked at the destroy ending, I looked at as just a return to a longer cycle, where now what's going to happen is, yes, everybody gets rocked back to the Stone Age or back a few hundred years or something, but organic and synthetic life still exist. Conflict will still occur, and now there won't be any Reapers around to preserve, quote unquote, preserve how they do it, organic life. And so synthetic life will wipe it out. Eventually, eventually what would be left would either be the Geth or some other synthetic, something maybe based on Edie. Even if Edie didn't want to do it, maybe the next version of her would, or if she became a race of androids instead of just a single individual. I don't know.
Or a Solarian one, or a Krogan one, or an amalgamation of them all.
I think this is a fundamental problem with any narrative that tries to have that cycle as part of it. Whenever you have this, this is a problem that the ancients have tried to solve with all of their amazing technology and they still couldn't. You run into this problem where either you have to take this leap of faith and believe that your ethics and your morality are able to overpower this inevitable outcome, or you admit that there's nothing that can be done to break the cycle. And I think Battlestar Galactica, the rebooted Battlestar Galactica, with its very disappointing ending for a lot of people, is another sort of hint of it. And while it's a really interesting mechanic for while the story is going, the whole idea of a cycle is one which doesn't lend itself to an ending. Right. If your ending is the beginning of the next cycle, you're never going to leave people satisfied. And I can't think of a single narrative off the top of my head where a cycle has provided a fulfilling ending.
Dark Souls.
I never played that.
Yeah, me neither. But we'll have to have the fans look that up. But it's funny, Jilly, because exactly the point I wanted to make at some stage was this. Is that because the endings for certain people will never be 100% satisfying, and I never really expected that anyway, but a lot of other people did. A lot of other fans wanted that. And that's where I think Narc leaving those little signposts of those conventional victories were not possible along our gameplay, so I wouldn't have that false expectation, helped. But I always try to keep in mind that other people didn't have that. Other people weren't whispering in their ears, don't expect too much. Don't, you're not going to be able to win.
I wanted to point out that Sovereign wasn't necessarily a typical bad guy in the sense that he was just lying to you. Like, I don't believe he was lying to you. He told you the truth as far as he knew it, and he believed everything he said.
And he had to be overthrown.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing that is, and it would kind of resonate with me, that why the green ending is in fact the best one, is that it's the only one that really, really, really does break the cycle. That it is a finality to the entire repeating history in the Mobius loop that has been the synthetic organic conflict. And it brings back, actually, believe it or not, a particular episode, because this is a thing in sci-fi that's been done before. I don't know how many people watched Star Trek Voyager very much, but there was one episode back in the day called Unity.
I just watched that.
You're kidding. Okay, all right. Well,
yeah,
so
today,
this ties
today.
in. Oh my! Seriously? Oh my God!
Seriously?
All right, now that's funny. All right, so then Jilly will have this fresh in her mind, but in case you guys hadn't seen it, I know Narc is not a fan.
I'm Googling it now.
I don't know where Mal stands on Voyager. But basically, the story of it is that Chakotay crashes on a planet where some Borg had escaped, and we're trying to rebuild society, not being tied to the collective. But because they're no longer in the collective, their old conflicts and racisms and whatnot has factioned the groups. Half of them are attacking the other half, and sooner or later they're going to die. And one solution that some of the people had come up with was to create a cooperative that if they could reinitialize the link locally, so basically making a new little collective, everybody would be able to play nice in the sandbox and everybody would live. And that I completely had in my mind at the end of this, and why the green option.
That sounds more like the
because,
rewriting the Geth heretics at the end of Mass Effect 2, which
yeah,
I did and I thought was morally superior to destroying them in some way, but then that actually comes against that makes it harder for you to make peace with the Quarians in the mission that we did. That was why we had to save Chorus.
Yeah, but the green ending, the way that it was sold to me was that if this happened this way, organic and synthetic will finally be able to get along because they will both be one and the same. They will be two sides of the same coin, and that the conflict will finally end because organics will get what they need from synthetics, and synthetics will get what they need from organics, and there wouldn't be any point anymore. And I think a lot of complaints that I've been reading about that particular ending is that it is very, like you said, Mal, totalitarianistic. It is completely out of the hands of the general public. Nobody has any kind of a say in it. And that was also a big conflict in the Unity episode, where one of the reasons why Janeway originally went against this was that nobody's getting a vote here. We're arbitrarily saying, you know what? Guess what? You're going to be part of the collective, and that's that. And that really goes against a lot of people's concepts of freedom and choice. And it's a very universal thing where nobody likes people making decisions for them that they have no say in.
And there's also the bit in that episode where they take control of Chakotay in order to just get
to achieve their goals.
Yeah, to achieve their goal. And then they let him go because they are a benevolent collective. But at the end, he and Janeway have their little sort of heart-to-heart, and she's like, "How are you?" And he's like, "Well, mind raped, basically, and not that happy."
I feel used. And yet, that was still the correct solution.
See,
and that's the thing that and that's what people don't like. That was actually the correct one, and people don't like the fact that it's correct one because it goes against all certain fundamental principles. People are getting used without any choice or any say in it, and yet it is the one that actually unifies the galaxy in a way that has never been done in any of the cycles prior. And you know what? too effing bad. Because the simple fact is, and the whole thing, a lot of people were complaining about the destruction of all the different mass relays and like, oh, the universe is going to collapse, but we're not going to be able to have commerce and blah, blah, blah. No, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. The universe got along very, very well for many, many years without them being there. They'll get along without them for a while until they're repaired. And if the Reapers are all playing nice with everyone, which they said that they were, obviously they can repair their own technology. So at worst, it's a temporary situation. So all people complaining about that aspect, I don't quite understand or get why they're saying, oh, no, she's the worst war criminalist ever, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, they made them before. They can either make or repair them again. So I'm not buying that.
Yeah, I don't think any of the 3/4 endings are bad endings. You know, Shepard wins in all of them. It's about how do you win.
I just know what the wiki tells me, and the wiki says the wiki says those are bad.
The wiki's very angry.
The fandom was furious. I was part of the fandom back in the day, and it was ugly. Yeah. There were forums were splitting off into camps. You know, it was people were totally unable to talk about it in any kind of friendly kind of way. So crazy for gamers, right?
You know what? Once they're one with the collective, that will no longer be a problem.
Yeah. I want to make a point about the whole indoctrination, mind control, Geth rewriting bit. But before that, though, did BioWare retcon or walk back that? Because I thought I remembered before the modified endings came out in the DLC, in the patch, I thought really that what we were watching here was that, like, okay, you can resolve this conflict, you can break this cycle however you want. Here are a bunch of ways to do it, but there's a cost. And the cost is the destruction forever of the Mass Effect relays.
That's what I thought was, yeah.
This technology was made. It was made by us. You don't understand it. We only let you use it. And if you're gonna take us out of existence, either by destroying us or taking us over or fusing with us, no matter how you do that, the method, the vehicle that you're going to use to achieve that is going to be consumed by your choice. And so I kind of took it as especially on the destroy side, if you short circuit the cycle by taking the Reapers out of the equation, then we have to take away the mass relays because that's the only way of preventing or delaying the eventual conflict. The thing that would allow Geth or any other synthetic life form to spread throughout the galaxy and ultimately exterminate all biological life is the existence of the mass relays. And so they must take them away. And then in the patched ending, there's the Edie voiceover, which seems to be like, oh yeah, you know, a bunch of people died and some stuff broke, but no biggie, you know, we're gonna fix it. And I was like, wait a minute, are the mass relays gone or not? Because I mean, people didn't have the capability of making them; they barely understood how they worked.
I think it's left ambiguous. I always assumed, like Blackstar, that, you know, it would be a setback of maybe a couple of decades while they sort of started reconstructing them all.
Well, a lot of people felt that they were destroyed forever. And they were like, oh my god, the universe is going to collapse. All these people are left to starve on all these planets because they can't feed themselves, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, Narc, I really like those interactions that you had with Harbinger and some of the other high-functioning AIs that they had left and all the different aspects where they start talking about conversations. It's like, this is beyond you, you know? And I think as human beings, we have a hard time dealing with the fact that our brains are only so big.
Yeah,
they only work so well. And there's a whole bunch of things that we are not going to be able to, A, comprehend, B, understand, or C, be able to control. And understanding that, you know what, on a scale of 1 to a million, we're on number 8. You know, we're only going so far. And other creatures, other beings, other AIs, other organisms in the universe are and will be beyond us. And when, you know, I kind of do the parallel of the parent and the child wants what it wants. It can only do so much. And yet with the parents making decisions for it, the child doesn't comprehend or understand. He's frustrated and annoyed. And yet these are the best things for him. The parent knows, the child does not. The parents had experience, the child does not. So, you know, being along through that where the ending ended up paralleling that, I kind of had expected that, because all of the setup that they had before about these creatures doing this for so long and knowing so much, and the amalgamation of all the different races they now have access to their knowledge and experience and flavor, if you will. It's kind of a bad blender line, but yeah, that's the only one I can think of. I kind of expected the ending to reflect that, and it sort of did. And of course, Shepard being special, where she was supposedly the only one to have gotten this far for organics throughout all the other cycles before, means that, okay, she's earned the right to choose, or the option to do something different.
Yeah.
And I think the AI and I think the Reapers deep down actually kind of wanted that. They were trapped in this as much as we were. Also, I think the green option was the only one that gave them out for everything.
It's interesting, though, that the way you earn the privilege of speaking to that AI with the same authority that the original creators did, basically saying, okay, now we will revisit the question, right? We've been pretty adamant about pursuing this course of action for quite a while, but we're also kind of unsatisfied with it, which I think that the character basically just comes out and says, like, look, this is not ideal. We're aware of it.
Yeah.
Of this. It is interesting, though, that the way you earn the right to revisit that question is by shooting a lot of dudes. I mean,
a lot of people gonna die.
Now, to go back about the thing that the mind control of Chakotay and the indoctrination by the Reapers and all these other kinds of things, I'm also kind of wary of that trope, because to me it just reminds me of the body snatcher invasion kind of thing, which was basically just a thinly veiled metaphor for communist subversion, right? So you've got all these things where you've got the Flood Collective and the Reaper Collective, and you got all these things that kind of set up the idea that you brave independent individuals with all your player agency are being subverted by a thing that wants you to join something bigger than yourself, and this thing is always associated with death and decay and corruption, and obviously your only choice as a free-thinking individual is to destroy this thing instead of join it. And so I was kind of like, hey, yay, there's a synthesis option here, which is you voluntarily choose to join this thing, and it's not presented as corruption, destruction, or death. Of course, the problem is that it's only voluntary for you, but hey, you're a strong individual with a lot of agency. I guess you just have, everybody else has to just suck it up.
Before we get too deep, I do have one question, because this also was a weird theme that I didn't quite expect. I'd read something where a lot of people were terribly, terribly upset in that one scene where Joker leaves the combat situation to get the crew and everyone else out of there. And a lot of people, for some weird reason, and I don't quite understand it, saw Joker as an incredible coward for running away, and that was totally against his character. He would never have done that. That's
the extended cut.
It is. Okay.
Yeah, so in the original ending, when the beam hits the team, you're just on your own. You don't know where your crew are. You don't get that final goodbye. And you literally, I remember doing it, and being really late at night.
That worked better for me, I think.
Yeah, and it worked really well for me as well, because you're literally just fighting so hard, totally wounded to get to the Citadel, and you don't know. You think, everyone else could be dead. This is the end, basically.
Right, you were more focused on your ex. Okay, because see, I also hadn't gotten that. I had only gotten the expanded version, I guess, and I don't know the discrepancies between the two to judge it enough on what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what wouldn't be.
I think, unfortunately, the internet plot hole police watched the first sequence of endings, and when they finally see at the very end of it, the Normandy racing ahead of that explosion, and then Joker is on there along with whoever else manages to survive, depending on who it is. Sometimes it's Joker and Edie, and then sometimes there's somebody else there as well. I think they were like, hey, that shouldn't be possible. There was a big space battle. He's suddenly flying away. Why is he flying away? How do these people survive? They shouldn't have survived. So then they put in the new scene, right, where one of the vehicles, smashes into whoever you brought with him, and you call in for the evac, and you tell Joker to take them away so that they live. And I see why they did it. And I think it worked better. It kind of worked better when all it was that, like, yes, you went in this with your fire team, and then something terrible happened, and you come to, and everybody is dead. You don't know. I mean, that your squad mates aren't there, but you don't know where they are, and you still have the mission to do, and you can't turn around and see where they are and try to save them.
Yeah, it's
you
kind
just
of an operational necessity thing. Yeah,
and then it turns out at the end that, okay, they survived. Somebody at that point had a burning desire to know how that happened and to be angry if they didn't know it. And it just rolled right over me. I was like, oh, they survived? Awesome.
Yeah,
somebody lived.
I was exactly the same.
I mean, I didn't need the dots connected for me on that. Other people, I think they had a stronger desire to know how and why that happened. And I was more emotionally satisfied by both of those choices. And the idea that as attached as Shepard was to your crewmates, the mission was bigger than that. And that was the mission of the game, right? There were all these places where sometimes you made decisions and people had to die. And no matter how you felt about it, you still had to make them, and you still had to keep playing.
Yeah,
keep going.
Absolutely. Blackstar kind of raised a question for me, which I hadn't thought of before.
Ooh, that's a good thing.
But all this talk about the mass relays. We're going to Andromeda next, where surely there are no mass relays.
Right.
That's right.
How are we intending to get around the galaxy?
Conventionally, apparently.
I don't know. But what's convention? I mean, you talked before about having no sense of scale, right?
Yeah.
I watched Force Awakens and watched some of the scenes of planets, and I'm like,
it makes me so angry.
That is not how that works. You can't see that from there. What are these scenes where, and then of course I'm looking at some of this.
Why does everything happen in the same solar system? It makes me so angry.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking of like the distances and the scales aren't like that. You're not looking. And then of course they showed me some of the simulations they've gotten back from the imagery they've got from TRAPPIST-1. And I'm like, oh, there are systems like that with big planets in really close with fast orbits, and you looking up from one surface and another planet is filling the sky above you. I'm like, all right, fine. Universe wins. Well, I'm wrong.
No matter how much you think you have an idea about the universe, I've always understood that you have absolutely no clue.
But so in Mass Effect 2 and 3, you use the mass relays to get from cluster to cluster, but then you go into a cluster of systems that are multiple light years from each other, and you're flying. How long does that take?
It must be at least days, right? Because it has to be long enough for you to get your love interest up to your cabin, give them a good rogering, and then get prepared for the final mission. So it's going to be at least that long.
Right.
Give them a good roger.
Yeah.
So 20 minutes. So 20 minutes.
Yeah. So what do you do for the rest of the evening?
Feed the fish.
When you think about the size and the space and the scale and all the other things, that once you get there and you're using fuel and you only have so much to get from here to here, and it takes it so long to get from there to there, and that whole conventional aspect and the time aspect and the rushing aspect, not to mention the communications one, where circumstances can change very, very rapidly, and the whole conventional conflict and whatnot. The Reapers never really behaved in a way that I thought was conducive to actually taking over a galaxy. And if they know of Shepard and they're worried about what she does and whatnot, why isn't anyone actively pursuing her, where she goes and what she does, when she does it? There are so many different things, because you're popping everywhere to do these little missions everywhere. Why don't you have a counterpart which is trying to kill you on the Reaper side?
I think they tried to do that with Mass Effect 3, because if you believe that the elusive man is indoctrinated and has been for quite a while, at least since the end of Mass Effect 2, if not further back than that, then Kai Lang is supposed to be the nemesis. It's supposed to be him getting instructions to eliminate Shepard as a factor by using an individual that is as close to Shepard as he can make one.
Yeah, but they have to make him so annoying, though. Like, he has all of this invulnerability during the battle.
It's a real failure. I don't like that character, and not in the good way you should dislike an opponent.
Yeah, not as an effective nemesis or a character that fits within the universe in the story very well. He's not a good
scary
bad
or intimidating at all. He's annoying.
Yeah, he's not a good bad guy.
And uninteresting.
Yeah.
He's so one-dimensional, and that taunting email thing. What the hell was that about? What is he, a 12-year-old AOLer? I mean,
Saren was much better. In fact, the thing that
infinitely
stands
better.
out for me is in terms of the actual opponent for the character, Saren is better than anything that's else in the game, with the possible exception of the Elusive Man.
Well, see, I always saw the Elusive Man as not so much a nemesis, but the antagonist, and the whole idea that you were pitting your will and your perceptions of the universe and your decision making against.
Yeah.
Whereas Kai Ling just seemed like his little lapdog.
Yeah, no, Kai Ling doesn't have. I mean, a character can only be as interesting as their motivations, right? And Kai Ling doesn't really have one.
None.
He's a guy being given instructions by a guy who's receiving instructions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's how interesting can it be?
Unless
you're going to call that out, unless you're going to lampshade that whole idea and say that the real victim of the "would you kindly" moment isn't the player or the shepherd, but is Kai Ling, because he's playing his role. On behalf of the Elusive Man, who's doing it on behalf of the Reapers, who's doing it on behalf of the designers.
Yeah, not to mention the fact you can't romance him. There's no options whatsoever.
Yeah, no for it, no option. Jilly, you put something in the show notes about fan service. You didn't actually call it fan service here, but you mentioned the Tali Garrus romance, which actually Blackstar was quite surprised to discover while we were doing the playthrough.
A little.
I don't think I had even seen that, because I think in at least one of the playthroughs that I did, my shepherd romanced Garrus. So I think that just doesn't happen in that playthrough. Now, was that something? I mean, were there fans who were shipping Tali and Garrus, and was it just because they were the Dextro DNA aliens who had compatible physiology, or was there some other reason?
Yeah, well, there were loads of little fan things which evolved and were referenced in the games. And I really liked when you were sort of talking about the whole playing as a film director thing. Kind of resonated with me, because there were lots of little things like Blasto's evolution from this joke to actually being a part of the game, and Tali and Garrus having that slightly random hookup, because there was all this fan theory about these relationships going on the Normandy. I think in a lot of ways, maybe one of BioWare's big problems is they listen to their fans too much.
Too much?
Yeah.
The romances in Andromeda, I think, is going to be another sort of aspect of that, because so much of the, as we already sort of mentioned, so much of the advertising about Andromeda has been like, oh, look at this love interest, and look at this alien, which one are you going to next? And there's, actually there are other things in the game.
I love how she qualifies that with next.
There was even a tweet that came out and that said that there was going to be explicit sex scenes, and then they were like, oh, wait, we thought everybody would understand that was a joke. And I'm like, I didn't.
Yeah,
I thought you were serious, because it looks to me like that's what you guys have been shooting at for a while.
Yeah.
But
yeah, absolutely. And I just think it was quite interesting that some things that they pick up, like Shepard's dancing as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a throwaway thing that happened in the first game, and it just kept getting brought back as this little joke. It stops you from, again, being that this is me in this world to this is Shepard in this world, and I'm playing this character. Shepard's
an adult person with a backstory. I mean, you get some choice in it at the very first game, right? Where you're choosing these things, a survivor versus, the colonist versus spacer,
dancer.
Ruthless, or, I forget what the other option is there, but
exotic dancer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dancer, not a fighter, not a lover. Yeah, we'll go with that. But they're a formed person, and you can direct them, you can push them in different directions, but you can't define them. And I always felt that any choice that they needed to present for Shepard needed to be something that person might conceivably do, because you think about every choice you make in your life, right? There's some things that you just don't consider, and there are some things that you do. I might do this, or I might do that. I just might be passive aggressive with this journalist, or I might decide I've had enough, and
there's social, economical, there's
hit him in the
strategic, there's
But but Shepard wasn't going to shoot them. You know what I'm saying? Like, he wasn't going to kill them. So there were some things that they decide that Shepard won't do, and you don't get an option to do everything you might do. And that's, of course, the first thing when they play a Rockstar game, right? Is that you're one of these characters and you just go out the street
you can punch the reporter, but you can't romance her. So, what's up with that?
Yeah. So talk a little bit about Blasto, though, because we did not really talk about that at all.
At the end of Mass Effect 1, one of the BioWare people threw out this joke, and it just became mimetic immediately, and people were going on about it, and he sort of adopted this James Bond-like persona. And then in Mass Effect 2, it was hinted at with the trailers, the billboards, like you say, and I think there was like an audio clip as well. And then in Mass Effect 3, there was more of it, but also if you play the Citadel DLC, you can actually go and meet him, do this really weird little, it's a little character moment with Javik. And the Citadel DLC has all of these dates that you have with all of these characters. And the one that you have with Javik is you go down to the film set. Javik is in there because Blasto is a jellyfish. I can't remember what they're called again.
Hannah,
thank you.
They worship Protheans.
Exactly. So like that's why they've tried to bring Javik down. And then Shepard is supposed to be playing this damsel in distress and obviously refuses and sort of beats up Blasto and then walks off the film set. And it's just weird. It's just like, it's funny and it's kind of cute, but it's not, it's not real in any sense at all. And there's like a really funny bit where there's like a Vorcha counselor is on the film set and things like that. And, it doesn't feel organic to the game in a lot of ways. It's definitely for the fans.
As we're recording this, I think we're 48 hours or so from the release, the full public release of Mass Effect Andromeda.
Yeah, we haven't jumped into the early stuff like a lot of the other
I just wanted to point out that for me, however apprehensive I might be about what they're doing with this new game, with new characters in a new galaxy, done by a new studio in a new engine, there is one thing that I liked that they did, which was that they said after that trilogy that story about those characters and that conflict is over, and we're going to do something else, which is not, for instance, what Halo did and what I kind of wanted Halo to do, and which is why I don't really consider myself a Halo fan the way that I did, in the sense that I'm not buying each new game as it comes out and looking forward to what the next one is doing. I'm kind of hoping at some point they will do something to capture my interest. But to me, after Halo 3 brought that conflict to what was for me a satisfactory emotional, intellectual conclusion.
Absolutely.
To start off with 4 and saying, yay, here we go again. We're going to do callbacks to the first game. We're going to wake up the Master Chief. I kind of respect what they were trying to do with the Cortana figure, but I also kind of thought they had already done that. Like Halo 3 never explicitly references rampancy. But there are all the vague Cortana moments where they're playing her off as damsel in distress. They never actually say why. We presume it's a result of something Gravemind did to her or something. They don't ever really talk about what her distress is, other than being abandoned and needing rescue. But then it just seems when they do the rampancy thing, it just seems like they're doing it over again. I feel like we did that. Cortana needed rescuing. We rescued her. And we did that. And
hey, so did Keys, and we ended up doing that a couple times.
And now to make that the sole mission to do it again, I don't know. I just didn't. Some people seem to think that game really deepened and fleshed out that relationship, and I just didn't see it that way.
Wait, are you talking about 3 or 4?
I'm talking about 4 because I actually haven't played 4. I own the Master Chief Collection, so I have it. I'm never able to get far enough in it to finish it. But I have watched some cinematic playthroughs, that include all the cinematics. So I know more or less what happens, at least as much as anyone can say they know what happens in that game. But I guess there were a lot of people who just felt that, oh, the focus on the Master Chief Cortana relationship was really deepened in that game, and I didn't see it. Maybe if I played it as opposed to watching it, I would feel differently about it. I feel good about the idea that Mass Effect was trying to start over with new characters and new settings and new conflicts, rather than saying, well, this is a popular franchise. It's popular because people like these characters and they like this thing, and so we should just figure out a way to unkill Shepard again.
I'm at least glad that they had that good sense to not hang on to the established part of that thing, because of the very reasons that you're citing. That when I played Halo 4, it was very much everything you just said. A whole, like, here we go again, let's do this, like, let's make sure we hit all the right notes, but they didn't go about trying to say anything new or expanding anything out. And I don't know if brave is even necessarily the word I want to use, because they are trying to carve out, like literally and figuratively, uncharted territory in the Mass Effect universe. I just don't feel like there's any way to genuinely move something that's established like Mass Effect forward without doing that sort of thing.
Maybe it's just because of the scale of it, but I also think that Halo at least was trying for something of similar scale in terms of how your small actions of shooting dudes and pushing buttons translates into this galactic change. I also wouldn't have thought it was possible to try and bring those characters back and have them do something else and save humanity again.
The problem with what you're talking about there is that it requires a degree of isolation, and it requires smaller battles and no large epic pitched battles between two evenly equipped sides,
or massively uneven,
because that's a lot of what you ended up getting later on in Halo. They had these huge set pieces where there's multiple Scorpion tanks in play, and there's, all the Scarabs and all this kind of stuff, and like some of that stuff is really, really cool. But the issue is that the gameplay or not even the gameplay formula, but almost like the canonical formula from Marathon was still the big holdover into Halo, where you have your AI and you have your one super soldier, and that is all the force that you really need, because the right amount of force applied in the right place at the right time is very much the same kind of notes as you get from Half-Life, where they say, oh, the wrong guy in the wrong place at the right time can make all the difference.
The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world.
So the major dynamic within Marathon was always that, and I would argue in the first Halo at least, yes, you did get tanks and you got the armor and you had Foehammer and that kind of stuff, but it was still kind of a ragtag contingent of survivors from a human ship on the alien construct. It wasn't. It just wasn't pitched battles on the scale that you see things done in the post Bungie Halos and things like that. And I really think that if that was a goal for Mass Effect, you would still need to represent those sides unevenly to magnify the impact of your main character on a galactic scale. But you can have one character's actions impact things on a huge scale, but you still have to have the conflict that character is involved in be relatively small. I mean, to take it back to the Marathon example again, you have your one super soldier against an entire garrison, and but it's still a very personal fight at that level. And I think that the post Bungie Halos kind of lost sight of how those things are supposed to be constructed, and you didn't get sort of intimate moments between the side of good where you're really focusing on those motivations at that level. I don't know. It all just kind of seemed like it mushroomed into something else.
A lot happens in Halo 4 that just flat out confuses me. Not in terms of I don't know what's happening, but in terms of I don't know why you decided to make that happen. And I think the first one really is the UNSC Infinity. We just had a situation where we started off being a really small group, and then everything kind of ramps up and ramps up and ramps up. And then, Halo 3 ends with this, every last human soldier that we have is now going to go to this place and do one last attack to try and make a thing happen. And I really thought with Halo 4 they were bringing it back to the Halo 1 era of like, no, you're going to encounter a very strange environment almost all by yourself.
Yeah.
And then they bring in the UNS Infinity.
Who else is going to give you ammo drops?
I guess that was it, right? You
Right.
had to, they didn't want to restrict you to the alien side of the armory, and there's no reason for that. But I don't know. But the Dawn crashes. Can't the Dawn have blown up and spread a bunch of ammo crates around the world? I mean, does anybody really worry about that? I mean,
did you like ODST?
Yes, I loved ODST.
Me too.
ODST and Halo 3 are the two in the whole series that stand out for me. And then, of course, the original 2 gets kind of a black mark because of some of its flaws, although it gets credit for being really ambitious.
And the multiplayer.
Reach is really polished on a mechanical level, but I also just kind of found it unnecessary from a plot perspective, from a character perspective.
Yeah.
Reach just didn't resonate with me as much as I wanted it to.
Yeah, I think Reach tried to force you to care about some characters that were poor, really, in Reach.
Well, you just met them, and they weren't that deep to begin with.
Yeah, and they had a set order that they were all going to die in, and it was very telegraphed.
I also said that, I'm like, well, they just took on too much, right? They gave you too many characters. Halo always had a very limited palette of characters, and then Reach throws too many at you too quickly, and then kills them off so quickly that you don't even have time to care about them before they're dead.
But the difference being is that with something with Mass Effect, though, is that those characters that you come across and interact with, the interactivity that you have with them affects whether they live or die, and that's something that you don't get with Halo. You don't get with Marathon.
Different style. I mean, it's a...
And now, which do you prefer?
Well, I think both of them suffer from this trying to make the stakes as high as possible, trying to tell these really massive stories. And I think both of them are actually stronger when they have this kind of like, oh, do this thing. And then, oh, actually, there's a deeper subplot underneath. But when it comes back to that cycle idea, when, it's actually you're trying to change the course of the universe, there's that mismatch between the mechanics of wanting to go and shoot things or create singularities and warps and things like that, and actually what is the real reasonable way that this problem could be accomplished. And I kind of wish in some ways that games would just pull back a little bit and be like, okay, you're a space pirate, go and be the richest space pirate you can be, because I would play the shit out of that game.
That's Elite Dangerous.
So that being said, the parallels between the two of them, Flood versus Reapers, Synths versus Reapers and Flood.
They're hegemonizing swarms, right? They're metaphors for communism. They're the thing that want to take your individuality away from you.
Yeah, they're very safe enemies, aren't they? You couldn't possibly... It's not like a Call of Duty game where you're fighting, some sort of strange race of brown people, which may or may not be Islam. We're not really sure about that. It's a very safe enemy, is the communism analog.
Or robots, like stormtroopers, space Nazis.
Yeah.
Is that more reflective of us and the environment that we grew up in, the 70s, 80s, 90s, where communism and the whole Cold War is kind of permeated into our society and our perceptions about things. Is that more indicative of the writers and the developers and what they've grown up with as far as story themes and whatnot? Or, what do you guys think about that as far as the parallels between that and where they came from?
I think some of it is driven by genre and engine. If you go back 20 or 30 years, right, all the distinctions that we know of now between genres of games, like this is a shoot 'em up, this is an RPG, a lot of them are driven by engine and interface, right? Because you couldn't do everything. Like Wizardry is an RPG because there's practically no animation in it. And then you play Zaxxon, and Zaxxon's a shooter and it's got 3D, moving things in it. And so I think what kind of happens with with these games is that the kind of game it is determines the kinds of conflicts that you're going to have and necessitates certain choices about what the player is going to do and how you're going to feel about that, right? So once you've decided that you're some kind of shooter, even if you have RPG elements, right? You're a third-person shooter. You're going to need a lot of things to shoot. And we're going to need to make a hero out of somebody who shoots a lot of things. If those things are just people who have different opinions than you, that's kind of a problem for making a hero. So you get all these games and films that come up with ways around that. You get stormtroopers, you get robots, and you get zombies. And that's what the Flood are, and that's what the Husks are. They're zombies. In other words, they're people. And this is what really gets me about it, right? Is it goes right back to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, right? What are those? Those are Soviet moles in American society. They're not people who've merely been persuaded by a competing ideology, because that would just be a person who changed their mind about something. No, they are taken over. Again, it's the indoctrination, right? It's mind control. Mind control is just a cheesy way of saying you talked to somebody else and they convinced you of something that I think is wrong. Now I'm going to shoot you.
Yeah.
And it's easier to do that when you say, no, that's not what happened. You didn't suddenly decide to pledge allegiance to a new ideology. You were brainwashed. You had your mind controlled. You're indoctrinated. These are all metaphors for the same thing. And so and when that's done in the service of a homogenizing force like join the Flood, join the Reapers, get literally blended into pink slime and molded into I don't even know I honestly don't know what they thought they were doing with Mass Effect's 2 ending. That thing's weird, but
yeah, same here. I had major issues.
Yeah, that was the only character I was really bummed about losing so far in the whole thing, was the engineer that she was in that pod there that I couldn't get out of. That was a horrible scene.
It's Yeoman Chambers. Is she dead?
There's more. Over here. God. She's still alive!
we lost the engineer and Kelly Chambers actually because
she was a little oversexed, to be honest.
Oh, Chambers? Yeah. You mean Chambers or the engineer? Because I think Blackstar was actually talking about the engineer.
Yeah. Whoever the NPC character was, who's like always trying to jump your bones, and then she ends up in a blender.
Yeah, that's Chambers.
Well, no, but that's the PA. That's Kelly Chambers. You have new messages at your private terminal. We also lost the female engineer.
You lost Gabby?
Yeah, we lost Gabby.
Yeah. Well, you can tell who's been watching the series and who hasn't,
I'm so disappointed.
Yeah, because basically because again, they were just
what'd you do?
There were just some things over the series that I just lucked into. Like I didn't need to go to any special effort to save Rex the first time I played the game. I had just done that mission because I liked Rex, and the mission came up, and I did it. And that ended up being crucial, although I never knew it, in saving him. It wasn't until we did another playthrough where we couldn't save him that I was like, oh crap, I actually need to figure out how to do this now. And I think the way I had played the game, I think I just got suckered into going for the suicide mission fairly early. And so these other things didn't happen. And it was someone who was watching the series who was posting some comments saying, if you wait any longer, you're going to have a problem saving anybody. And I was like, oh really? Oh crap. So we lost, I think, at least half the crew. I think
what's we?
We saved Chakwas. We saved Chakwas and and Donnelly, but we lost Chambers and Gabby. I don't know who else we named who else we lost of named characters. Probably more than that.
Yeah, we'd have to go back and look. But yeah, no, we came in, and next thing you know, we go into the ship, and it's empty. It's like there's nobody there. So yeah, we lost a lot to tell you the truth. So,
although it is funny that no matter how many side missions you do, you always arrive just in time to see Kelly get blended.
No, you can
Yeah,
say
and
Kelly.
But not to stop it.
that emotionally was kind of jarring. That kind of really got to me. It's like, didn't anybody have a gun to shoot the glass out there? You know, it just.
I was thinking, why did they have to put her in feet first? Couldn't they just put her in head first and save some, agony?
You.
Why does that chamber have a window at all? You would say.
Right.
I mean, really, if you think about it. There's nobody watching. There's nobody monitoring. There's nobody going to these things.
You got to see if the other one's been cleaned before you put a new one in the tube. Yeah, no, it just that for me, as far as losing characters, though, I didn't get that same kind of emotional attachment when we lost Miranda. It's like, Miranda's dead. Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah. Have you guys come across the fan theory that they changed the narrative towards the end of Mass Effect 2?
I have read a thing that basically said that there was supposed to be a setup in the recruitment mission for Tali with the idea of a star that was aging too quickly and the effects of dark energy. And the way I read it,
you mentioned this before.
This was something left behind by the original head writer, Drew Karpyshyn, who kind of got shoved off the series during the Mass Effect 2 and is not credited on Mass Effect 3 and left BioWare for a while and has now come back to BioWare but is not working on Mass Effect because he's working on Star Wars games instead. And that, his eventual conclusion for the series was supposed to involve dark energy, but frankly, it looks like they're recycling that for Andromeda now.
But I just think, because I always felt that the Halo games were kind of rewritten as they went forward, because I think that especially in Halo 2, there was a lot of evidence that Cortana was very rampant and untrustworthy. And then, you get this kind of body swerve.
You never liked her anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And you get this body swerve where, no, she's totally fine, guys. She's your best friend. Go and save her life.
Yeah, no, I think it made sense when it was only a single game. It made sense for that to happen, for her exposure to the Forerunner technology to drive her rampant. And then when they pulled her out, she was okay. And then whether there were any repercussions of that wouldn't matter until there was another game.
There were some whole underlining themes of her in the novels and copies of her, multiple copies of her going rampant in the books.
Who was it who was saying that Chambers doesn't get blended?
Me. Chambers doesn't get blended.
I'm watching that episode. I'm watching Chambers get blended.
Yeah, but you can get there in time to save her.
Oh yeah, but we couldn't because we did too many other missions before we went to the side mission. So I just thought maybe you were saying that the character we watched blended wasn't Chambers, because it was.
No, if you play the game right, like I did, she doesn't get blended.
Yeah, no, I know. When I played it as well, but again, I didn't see a lot of times. I didn't know why things turned out the way they did, so I didn't know why I was able to save her. As far as I knew after having played it, that was just what happens. And so I've been surprised by a lot of the things that happened when Blackstar played Mass Effect 3 because they weren't the same as what happened when I did it.
Yeah.
Does that due a lack of carryover with technicalities or just where the story was going?
No, I think it kind of should be that way. I think I think it's hard to make these kinds of games in an era where, within days, if not hours, there are guides up saying, here are the possible routes and here's how to get each one.
Get around them,
and read it before you go. I mean, if there were no guides and there was nobody to talk to about this game, I would just make decisions as they come, and what happened would be what happened, and that would be it. And maybe if something was so terrible, I would load a save and say, okay, I didn't, but I would only do that if I didn't mean to do a thing, not because I didn't like the result.
Well, that brings up an interesting point on replayability. I mean, in the era where YouTube and playthroughs and Let's Plays and what we do in general is a thing, do you think that does kill a certain aspect of replayability that a lot of game developers expect from customers? Because a lot of them are designed for people to go down these paths themselves to see the different variations. And yet, when you can just fire up a YouTube video and say, "Hey, here's all the endings of the game," now you don't have to play it. What are your thoughts on those things being a thing now, and how much that may or may not be actually changing games in and of themselves, not only the experience but also how they're made?
I really like Let's Plays, and I find Mass Effect probably one of the more difficult ones to watch somebody play, and that's just because because my Shepherd is so integral to sort of how I see that game. But if somebody has got interesting ideas, it's for me the value of Let's Plays is not necessarily knowing what's going to happen, but hearing somebody's processing of the game is the interesting thing for me. There are a couple of really interesting. So I watch quite a lot of small events that happen. So Fallout 4 is a good example of that. There's loads of, if you have this very specific character build, then you'll get this one line of dialogue. And if there's like a 5-minute video that shows me that, I'd much rather watch the 5-minute video than create a character which fulfills that very specific set of obligations and go and find it. I want to appreciate what the game has done without necessarily having to invest another 300 hours. Because I think I've got 300 hours plus on Mass Effect easily. But I was thinking about, did you guys ever play Life is Strange?
No, I haven't. I have watched all or parts of a couple of playthroughs of that. Funkmon was actually doing a Let's Play of that, and I did watch that.
It's really interesting, especially if somebody's doing a Let's Play of it, because it's a game that I wish I'd played as, investing more in the character, not doing what I wanted, but doing what I think the character should have done. And it's one of the few games where the gameplay elements are relatively, I think as a gaming society, we're very accepting of gameplay elements being tough, but we expect character interactions to be easy. We don't like it when a character interaction is blocked off for us. Whereas Life is Strange comes at it the other way, and actually the character interactions are really tricky, and there's like a really particular event where it's very, very difficult to get the desired outcome, and I really enjoy watching people do that part and fail at it, and their reactions to it I think is really interesting, because they're not used to because it's not just a case of checking all the boxes in some ways, although mechanically it's written differently, and they change up one of the gameplay mechanics unexpectedly, and it's a really powerful moment because of that.
Yeah, I think part of it is that game is trying to simulate conversations on a different level than Mass Effect is.
Of course, yeah.
Mass Effect has a few binary choices that you make here and there, but most often the conversation game in that is go through and trigger all the dialogues, get the most information out of everybody, do all the options, and of course, real conversations are a series of choices that you don't get to make again, that change the way the conversation flows, whereas you kind of expect in Mass Effect that what you're going to do in a lot of cases is that you're going to follow all the prompts to get all the conversation items, and when something is a real choice, that gets signposted clearly, whereas in Life is Strange it doesn't.
Well, definitely in Mass Effect, the information is actually a major aspect of it, because you're going down each of the trees to find out as much as possible from this character that you're interacting with, whether it's pertaining to you directly or your objectives or the game as a whole. You want to absorb as much out of them as possible, and that's why going back to them sometimes when you don't really know that there's more content there, and I think that's one of the reasons why we lost Miranda, is that we didn't go back to her enough or at the right time or as often as we should have with the other characters. And as a consequence, that changed the direction of where the gameplay was and where she finally ended up. So for that particular thing alone, I think a lot of the Paragon and or Renegade options have been changed. They wanted for people to feel like they're going to be reflecting more on the type of game and not so much an information exchange or what Mal had said before about the whole choose your own adventure aspect, where you flip a page and that's the choice that you make and the consequences you get thereafter. So as far as how that relates to the future titles, though, how do you guys feel about the change of the system there, where they've taken away the Paragon and they've taken away the Renegade, and they've decided to make it more of a stylized choice?
How much spoiler avoidance have you been doing with regard to Andromeda? Because there are Let's Players who have had Andromeda now for a few days. A lot of people were given access to play the first 10 hours. People who bought the game with an Origin subscription have gotten advance access to some of the game. So there's a lot of Let's Play content of a bunch of missions already out there. So I didn't know how much we wanted to talk about, or have you gone completely dark in terms of I don't want to know anything about Andromeda till it launches in 2 days or what?
I know very little. There was a couple of launch trailers, I think, that gave away some pretty significant chunks of the plot, which is very disappointing to me because I was hoping that for there to be the mystery to be prolonged a little bit longer to figure out, who the opposing forces are and what they're about and stuff like that. But some of that, I feel like the ad just kind of spilled it, and I don't think it was a good choice, but it is what it is. So I'm trying to remain largely in the dark, but I guess I want to say Andromeda has a couple of things to prove to me because I'm not the initial prognosis is not great. But I mean, if the multiplayer holds up, just purely from a gameplay perspective and that kind of thing, if that stuff holds up, I don't know that there's a lot that Mass Effect can do to disappoint me.
Okay, Jilly?
I am as unspoiled as I can be, given the fact that I sort of love spoilers.
How can you love spoilers?
Oh, I love spoilers. I'm really trying not to spoil myself, but I, like Mal, I've extrapolated from the things I've seen in the trailers.
Okay, so you knew about the fundamental Paragon Renegade change, though. Mm-hmm. Okay, so how do you feel about that?
I'm quite into it. I think, like we said earlier, the Paragon Renegade thing got read as good versus bad, which it was never supposed to be.
Right.
I think stylistically, I like the idea of being able to assign an emotion to the comment you want to make. Like, some of the things in Fallout 4, the dialogue choices, sometimes you'd select something and your character would say something, you're like, well, that's absolutely not what I intended to say at all.
Right.
So I think it's quite nice to have a bit more information than just the little tagline about what you're going to say. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Mal, what do you think?
Yeah, what's up? I'm sorry.
About the shift away from Paragon Renegade to the supposedly more nuanced, what is it, the casual, professional, emotional, intellectual distinction.
they're giving us a Myers-Briggs every time there's a reaction.
My rider is going to be INTJ.
Right. I think that I think it's a good step. I think it's before I get my hands on it and able to experience it, I don't want to kind of put too many eggs in one basket. But the way that it seems to me at this stage of the game, at least, is that that it's going to be a good thing for choice in narrative-driven games like this, where they're allowing the player to make decisions and sort of steer a conversation. Because before, I think things were very much binary, and aside from the tendency for the average person, I think, to boil things down to, I'm going to do this if I want to be evil, and I'm going to do this if I want to be good.
Right. Well, that also related to a score, which is no longer there too. So I think that's also a factor.
I very much welcome I see it as sort of a not to make it sound too grandiose, but sort of like a dawn of nuance in conversation, and I'm hoping that comes with that brings with it all the things that I sort of expect it to when you're going to be introducing a mechanic that's built around sort of conversational interpretation or reactions to things. So I'm very encouraged. I welcome the change. I don't really feel like there's anything that was vital that is being lost in them implementing that. So I'm very very curious to see how it pans out, because I'd like to see more things like that in the future if it really turns out to be kind of what I'm expecting.
Well, the only thing about it that I was curious about, and not having had a chance to get my hands on it myself, I don't know either, but I was curious about the consequences of those choices and how they relate to the gameplay, because a lot of the interactivity, like you said, is very binary. It's yes or no, good or bad, up or down, left or right. And for this, now you've got more of a range of them, and it's more of a tonal shift rather than a scorecard, because they were only certain aspects of the game that you could even have access to if you had a certain amount of Paragon. There are certain things that you couldn't do unless you had a certain amount of Renegade. And now that that's no longer there, I'm wondering how it's going to affect the actual outcomes of certain circumstances and how your tonality is chosen. And I'm curious as to whether or not that even is going to be a factor now, whether the choice, because that was the big thing that people always got hung up on, is that, my choices affect this and da-da-da. And it wasn't really exactly how that wasn't really correct that much. It was more so of a tone of how you wanted to be and how your character was and how you would be in that circumstances. It was supposed to be a reflectivity of you. And they kind of translated that where certain things happened when you were that way. Whereas now, you take away the Paragon and the Renegade, it's no longer on a scorecard. There's no barometer that goes up and down. So now the question comes, okay, if you're going to be a wise ass in every circumstances, how is that going to affect how the gameplay unfolds? If you're going to be logical, how is that going to affect how the gameplay unfolds? And how much swaying in either direction of those, how is that going to translate into the actual outcomes of certain circumstances? I'm just curious how, or if that's even going to happen, or is it only going to be superficial?
I really, really hope that it fundamentally makes things different, because playing through as Spock versus playing through as Deadpool ought to give you two entirely different outcomes, right? I mean, there's got to be some kind of gradation there, but if everything if the game responds to almost every situation with not a lot of variance based on how you approach it, then there's much less depth to that.
Yeah, see, I'm wondering if with Narc and I, when we play this thing off, whether he's going to be Spock the whole time, and I am so going to be Deadpool through the whole thing, and how that's going to translate, because we're basically going to be doing a tug of war every time he plays and I play.
If we're switching up, I guess we don't know how much of that is going to accumulate, right? With the Renegade Paragon thing, it was clear because it was tracked, right? I mean, taking certain paths gave you points that accrue and stick to you, and actually do make a difference in terms of locking or unlocking certain conversation options. We noticed that in the final mission, actually, where I think we were not high enough on Paragon to trigger Elusive Man to shoot himself, I think. Although we did manage it for Saren in the first. Right. But we did not have enough points.
No, was it because I punched the reporter, or was there?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. There was something. There was something. We did not have many Renegade points at all. Really did not have many. I mean, if you look at the two bars, they're way off from each other. But I think there are some options near the end of some of the games that if you don't have either max points or close to it, and if you unfortunately, if you shoot from middle of the road, like if you're just doing half and half, then there'll be a bunch of places where you just don't have any options at all because you don't have enough of either kind.
Yeah, and to me, that's kind of the flaw of the system. If you're too much of one and not enough the other.
They kind of blew it when they took out because you actually had Intimidate and Charm as skills you could assign points to in Mass Effect 1, and then they took that out. So the only...
Well, they kind of homogenized them into one of them.
Yeah, well, the only speech checks that were left in the game were the Renegade and Paragon options and the interrupts.
Yeah, I do miss that a little bit. I feel like that almost like D&D style option for conversation. I mean, sure, you could say nowadays it's archaic, but it at least attempted to simulate those aspects to things versus, I think, with the way that it ended up, it's still a little too pared down for me to at least feel like it's useful or worth it.
You should be playing Divinity then. I mean, no, really. Divinity, which we have a series that's on hold now, but we were playing Divinity Original Sin, which I think is
Which you should definitely check back the early episodes.
I think it's the third game in that series or something, but now they're doing a Divinity Original Sin 2, which I don't know if that makes sense, but that game on a mechanical level has come as close as anything ever has, maybe as close as anything could be, to playing an actual game of Dungeons and Dragons with the computer doing the dungeon mastering part.
Yeah, and it's really good.
For instance, you have a party of 4 characters. You can divide up control of them between people in co-op. If you don't have a co-op partner, then the AI can control them. The characters in your party can disagree with you, even if they're just controlled by the AI. They can disagree with you. If you have co-op partners who just choose opposing speech options in a conversation, they resolve it by having you play rock, paper, scissors. And you agree,
a variation thereof.
And you agree that whoever wins, that will be the choice that the party makes.
I like that a lot.
And my understanding that in the sequel, they've now expanded this option, so instead of just having things resolved like that, the party can actually break up, and characters can leave the party and pursue a separate adventure, and even endorse an opposing goal to other members of the party. So if you want like conversation heavy and a lot of real choices, Divinity does a great job.
Yeah, I might check that out.
Well, I tell you what. Why don't we just wrap up, because we've been going for 2 hours now. Final thoughts, either about the end of Mass Effect 3 or what you're expecting from Andromeda.
If I could go first real quick, just because I am up against a hard out here. Just a second. It came as a surprise to me as much as I think anybody else that I'm not super conflicted about the end of Mass Effect 3. I mean, I feel like it was what it was, and I was satisfied with the variety of choices. It was more of a minor annoyance to me that I didn't get much variation in terms of the animations. That kind of irritated me a little bit, but I'm kind of totally fine with it. I would say that with Andromeda, I'm hoping for obviously more in the same universe, which we are obviously getting, but I really am hoping that they do something that does not end up feeling like a one-off, in the sense of, things with like, you fought husks like all the way through Mass Effect, and I was just like, these husks are not Reaper husks, they're some other sort of husk, and that sort of thing, and I was just that really got to me, and I hope that they don't do
Thorian
a lot of
creepers.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah, the Thorian creepers. Like, if there's going to be
Diablo palette shift,
exactly. The palette shifting stuff really got to me, and I really want none of that. But and the other thing is, and it may be too much for me to expect this, but I find myself expecting this from almost any new game, which is mechanics that are unique with respect to the creatures and the species and things like that they introduce. That everything does not have to be symmetrical. Everything does not have to be bipedal. Everything doesn't have to be reminiscent of something else that we have in Earth physiology. Because even like the Arachni, they're just large insectoid things, and like I want unique locomotion, and I want unique, I want memorable experiences that way. And in recent titles, things like Destiny is the first and foremost example of this that I can think of. All of your enemies are, they're aliens or they're extra dimensional beings or whatever they are, but they're conventionally built, organisms. But if you're going by Earth physiology, you know what I mean?
Yeah. My understanding is that all the major species, I think with the possible exception of the Hanar in the Mass Effect series, were all made to be bipedals and using the actual, like the same skeleton,
right?
So that they could all share animations, and that all you had to do was add, textures. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was it.
And it's another one of those things. I think it's just a function of where the technology is at currently, that we're going to make a AAA game, so we need to be able to volumize our production of creatures. So let's cut these corners, and that then the result ends up being you have a bit of a limited palette, but people are still trying their best by sticking a different face on things, and so I know that's not really specific to Mass Effect. And I'm just hoping that we step further away from that with every every new property that's out there. But it remains to be seen if that'll hold true here. But with that, guys, I'm gonna sign off. It's been fun, but I will catch you later.
Catch you later.
Thank you, Malagate. Thanks very much. Chili, what were your final thoughts, either about the end of Mass Effect 3 or something that you're looking forward to from Andromeda?
Well, I liked the end of Mass Effect 3. I acknowledge that it has limitations, and I acknowledge that the sort of there's the sort of the technical limitations, and I acknowledge that there are narrative limitations as well. I think that there's something they were trying to get at which they didn't quite manage to execute as well as they wanted, and I think they've tried to backpedal away from that because of the fan outrage. And I think I'm really excited about Andromeda. I'm going into it slightly differently. I started when I started playing Mass Effect, it was very much me in space. I went for the backstory that sounded most like me, that time when I saved a whole planet. And I sort of became very attached to my Shepard. So I'm quite looking forward to going into this game deliberately playing a new character who is, because the Ryder twins, I think they're supposed to be 22 years old. They're young kids out there in the galaxy. And I think that's going to be quite fun to try to sort of play a different person out there. I'm a little bit worried that it's going to be railroaded again into this sort of classic hero type story, because if you present me with a choice.
So how much do you like spoilers?
I
because
love spoilers.
I've watched the first few hours of the game actually about 2 or 3 times already.
Yeah, I've deliberately not.
Yeah.
I'm trying to avoid it. But do you really want to say?
I was going to avoid it, and then I didn't manage to actually do it.
Do you really want to say something about it?
Well, let's see if I can be vague about it.
Okay.
We talked before about like the idea of being a chosen one, of being the subject of a prophecy that a lot of RPGs do. All the Elder Scroll games do that, and the Fallout games do it to some extent. And very early on in Mass Effect 1,
can be only one.
you get anointed, right? They already set up that you're an accomplished professional soldier. You are reaching the apex of your career with this idea of possibly being named a Spectre.
Yeah.
There's this side mission they put you on that turns out to be more important than anybody thought it was, that you do on the way. And it's during the course of that you become not just a Spectre, because they name you a Spectre later, but you're made the protagonist in this mission, where you encounter the beacon and you push one of your squad mates away so that it affects you. Presumably you think you're saving them. And then rather strangely, the other squad mate wishes to save you and is restrained by the other squad mate. So basically, like, you save one of them, and then one of them wants to save you, and the other one's like, no, don't. It's too dangerous.
Everyone's saving everybody else.
And that's what gives you the visions from the Prothean beacon. That's why you're able to comprehend what the other beacons are saying. That's what gives you this insight that makes you the Shepherd, not just Commander Shepherd. Fairly early on in what I've seen of Andromeda, they want to have a moment like that. They want to have a moment that anoints you as the main character in the game.
Yeah.
I don't think it's done anywhere near as well as Mass Effect 1 did it.
Yeah.
I think that as games get more and more expensive, right? As the as the quality bar for all assets goes up, and we go from 720p to 1080p, and we're hurtling towards 4K.
Yeah.
And you've got all of these assets that need to be created, and the hundreds of millions of dollars that's being spent on making these games.
Yeah.
And they wish to broaden the base and make gaming a true mainstream entertainment platform.
Yeah, but it also has to score
even
at
when it
least
isn't.
9 on Metacritic for anyone to get paid.
Yeah, or people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They don't get their bonuses. So I think then what they're trying to do is that they're trying to fit a lot of character interactions into some very acceptable, predictable, conventional sorts of ways. And one of the ways I've seen that in all forms of entertainment is that if you're going for lowest common denominator, you use family.
Yeah.
You focus on family. The relationships that are important to you are family relationships. They're not friends. They're not colleagues. They're not coworkers. They're not acquaintances. They're not even rivals. It's family.
You've been watching the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 trailer.
Shepard's family, yeah. Shepard's family only gets mentioned like in the whole series, I think, like once.
Yeah.
Like you go to Mass Effect 3 and you're like, Anderson's like, "Oh, I spoke to your mother," and I'm like, Shepard, what? What?
Mom?
My mother's alive? I thought my mother was dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You didn't come from a pod?
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. Or what? I mean, maybe you should play a character like Edie, so you don't have to worry about these kinds of things, because you have a different genesis than everybody else, and you don't have this. But
it's funny you say that, because that's an arc that they never quite covered from her aspect. Because first, our Shepard, which was Femshep, first was alive, then died, then came back. And you never talked to your family. You never went back to your mom and explained, no, I am back from the dead. Things are better now.
Yeah. I'm sorry. If Shepard's mother was alive, there should have been an email saying, "How dare you come back from the life without sending me a message?" I mean,
sure, but that's again where all this choice kind of starts falling down, because that's your backstory. My backstory was I was on Mindwar, and my Shep's family were all killed when she was 16.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah, see, there you go. So.
Choices.
So what they've done now is the setup is the twins, and you get to choose which one of them you want to be. The other one supposedly is still going to be involved in the story, but I haven't seen that part yet. But there is a part, given that you play a young character, there is this role that they want the player character to fit into.
Yeah.
And that's Pathfinder.
Yeah.
Which I'm guessing is sort of their smash up of Shepard and Spectre, right?
Yeah.
It is at the same time, it is an official title like Spectre, but it's also supposed to define your role in the game universe the way Shepard does. And this role is given to you in a dramatic way that, to me, makes very little sense and puts severe strain on having all the characters around you have comprehensible actions and motivations. I don't want to be any more specific about it than that, but I can see why. I can see that they were trying to recreate that process for Mass Effect 1, and I don't think they did it as well. And I think if just setting up family relations and family drama are enough for you, then it'll work. But if you want to see past that, or if you want something else, then you'll kind of be scratching your head about why did these people do these things?
Yeah, from what I've seen of Andromeda and the marketing material, and from the sort of trends that I've observed in Mass Effect over the last 10 years, that really doesn't surprise me, but it slightly disappoints me. And I think that's what I'm really kind of. I mean, I'm worried about it. I'm not worried about it. I mean, I have a pre-order, which is waiting to be downloaded on Thursday. Wednesday midnight kind of idea. Yeah, I pre-ordered.
Now, when did you get the pre-order? That's the question.
I got it from Amazon.
No. I mean, what time? Did you get it last week, or did you get it like 2.5 seconds after you heard about it?
I think I got it a couple of months ago.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So you did get it earlier than.
Yeah, I got it. I think I got it round about the time of the first sort of teaser trailer, which was sort of January, February time.
Okay, so you saw that and you whipped out the credit card and said, "Shut up, take my money."
I did. I'm terrible for pre-ordering stuff. I wanna have something immediately. I don't have the patience to wait for reviews. So, and also because they had a special piece of clothing that Ryder could have a special outfit, and look, I have to have the outfit. I have to be the best dressed
sucker for the
Pathfinder
DLC extras.
Is it the N7 uniform? Was that it?
I'm ashamed to say it, but I sprung for a slightly more expensive version with extra outfits because outfits are incredibly important. Okay. There was a casual outfit.
You're what's wrong with gaming.
I am what's wrong with gaming.
God.
I am why girls should not be allowed into gaming. Absolutely.
But she gets so many shoes.
I tend to do the pre-orders like 24 hours in advance because that way there's not going to be a last minute delay. I just want it downloading as soon as it possibly can. I don't want to have to wake up on launch day and then hit a button and then have to wait a few hours for it to download. I wanted to do it in the background.
Exactly.
So
I hear it's like 45 gigs. So we're gonna have to talk about when we're pulling the trigger and whose box is gonna be downloading what. But yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, before we do those practicalities, Blackstar, your final thoughts on Mass Effect 3 and or what you're anticipating in Andromeda?
Well, I definitely liked 3, and I think that because my ending experience was different than a lot of others, I didn't have the same issues with the ending that they had. They're definitely not ideal, but I think throughout the whole story, and because we were doing this very cohesively, I think a lot of people either their expectations and their feelings and their exposure, their experience as a whole was different
your
than
first
mine.
experience was part of a let's play, a very talky let's play of the whole thing, rather than it was just a game you were replaying.
Actually, the evolution of starting with Mass Effect 1 and 2 and developing the relationship and the character choices and the investment that a lot of other people have. So I think that from their perception, 3 was kind of a betrayal and was colored by a lot of expectations, and so that's where I think a lot of it had kind of manifested it. And because I didn't have that, I think that's probably why those endings for me were far more acceptable and whatnot. So I didn't have the issue with the ending or endings, because I have seen the alternates, I have seen some of the other potentials, some of the other aspects of it were confusing as to people's frustrations or angers with, but I also didn't have that either. So as far as this series goes, I don't know if I would replay it again, since I know how everything else is going to turn out, and all the variants thereof from a player aspect I can't really see as being necessary. I may do it again sometime for fun, but as far as the series as a whole, I liked it. I'm liking or should I say I like the multiplayer, because now that we are on the cusp of Andromeda, I don't see myself investing a lot of time into Mass Effect 3's multi. So I've kind of missed that boat. It's been out for a very, very long time. I've been playing other titles and other things.
You might want to go backwards and just play a little bit of 2 and then maybe 1, just to experience in reverse the gameplay changes.
Yeah.
Because even Mass Effect 3 is a little bit clumsy as a shooter, and it looks like they're really shooting
it is
to make, given that they put it in the, what is it, the Frostbite engine, I think, or whatever the name of the one they use for the Battlefield games.
Battlefield 1, yeah. Well, 1 and 2 is huge, obviously. There was a huge change between 1 and 2. 2 and 3 is more of an evolution, I think, than a revolution. And that's and leading into everything that I've been exposed for and seen with Andromeda, because I have seen a bunch of different videos. I have seen a couple of the joke things that people have. I have watched all the trailers, so I've been in anxious anticipation of this. And I have heard some of the trepidatious feedback with certain components. But the number one thing that a lot of people have all been consistent on is that the multiplayer is awesome.
Yeah.
And that kind of alleviates my worry about that, because the clunkiness that I feel, I think it's colored by the fact that a lot of the first-person shooters that I do are exactly that. They're first-person shooters. They're not cover shooters. I have not played a lot of cover shooters, so my perception in dealing with a lot of the mechanics in the combat environments is different.
It's soft cover with a lot more fluid motion. It's going to feel a lot more like a third-person Destiny. Than like
that's
Gears of
all
War.
my fault. That's all on my end. It's not the game itself. So not to unfairly judge it or say it's wrong or bad or whatever else. That's not the case. It's just my experience. I'm not modifying my behavior enough to do it the way that they expect. So that's all on me. But there were moments of it where it was becoming more fluid, and I think if I did play it more often or more regularly, it would become instinctive again. And so there are plenty of scenes during the Let's Play that we did where I had really, really great moments and it was flowing very, very well. Other ones I was getting frustrated and killed and couldn't understand why. But for what my anticipation of the next one is because the first three were very much a singular character arc. This was Shepard doing the whole Reaper Save Galaxy storyline. So now we've tied that up in a nice, neat little bow. It's finished. It's done with. Now we're going, hey, let's do something new and different. And now we've had to go to a whole other galaxy to do that. So instead of a Shepard type character, now you have a choice of these explorer type characters, either male or female. And that was kind of an interesting dynamic of setting them up as twins. I guess that gave you the option. Because even with the storyline, if you were changing genders or whatnot, I guess this was a neat way around.
Well,
I guess it was a little clever. For
I just thought it was kind of lazy in the sense that
really, I don't know. I
okay. Well, see, here's the thing, right? When they commit to we're going to allow you to be any gender you want, right? That means writing a full script and signing up a voice actor to do both parts. Knowing that if you treat it like the last games, somebody's going to make a binary choice in the first game, and that may be playing out for years. So that means you're paying a voice actor that a bunch of people are not hearing. And so I know that there's a lot of people who basically think that the FemChap is a much better performance, and I happen to agree. But also that is not the experience the majority of players had, at least partially because the male Shepard was the default on console, and more people played on console than PC, and more people chose male rather than female. So I can see someone creatively saying, that was a good character played by a good voice actor, and we want to do more stuff like that. And I could see somebody else saying, yeah, but most people didn't ever see that. And so if we hadn't spent that money, those people wouldn't notice. So the way I look at it, the twins mechanic was a way of, okay, we want to have that choice in there, but we can't commit to creating a bunch of assets that aren't going to be seen or heard. So by having them be twins, and you're one of them, and the other one is a story element, means that they write one script, they record one script with two actors, and you will end up hearing a bunch of those lines, regardless of which character you are, because the other one's going to be there to deliver that line anyhow at some point.
I don't know. From a game developer perception, I think that was kind of a clever solution.
But it also could be an erosion of the commitment to giving the player the choice of gender that you got in the previous three games.
Depends on your perspective, obviously, but in my interest of it, I found it an interesting way to approach the character as a whole, is that you have a choice of either of these ones, but you're still a component in the same dynamic, so that gender choice does not cut off or limit you or whatnot. You're you, but you can be the you that you want to be, but you're still going to be this writer character either way, regardless of what you choose from.
What did you think of the husband-wife mechanic in Fallout 4?
Okay.
No, because it's the same idea. It's, you're either the husband or the wife.
Oh, okay.
And
well, it's the same as Mass Effect in the sense that you make that choice, and then basically that other person doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So there's a full script, but it gets read by somebody else.
Because the only thing that bothered me about that was that it's forcing a little bit more backstory onto the character. If you want to play it in the Western style, where it's
yes, yeah, it does, because the way they set up the backstory there is that I think he's a soldier.
Yeah, and she's a lawyer who then becomes amazing at killing things.
Yeah, you don't really get to choose to role play in the post-apocalyptic wasteland as a lawyer.
Yeah,
there just aren't that many jobs for lawyers in the wasteland, at least not that we've seen. Somehow voice actors have roles in the Wasteland, but not lawyers.
But anyway, yeah. So getting back to Andromeda, the expectations I have, I'm trying to limit them, but I am worried about some of the technical issues that have been brought up, and that tweet just kind of really, it's like, wait a minute, we're paying big bucks for this, and the approach that they took for it was kind of an offhanded flip comment that obviously they didn't think too deeply about. But at the same time, it kind of puts things in a little bad light for the future.
When the actual release happens and the actual reviews get out, and then people start doing postmortems, then we'll see what it actually was. And again, I think what it may simply be is that regardless of how much time they've spent on it, they were basically handing over this franchise over to a different studio, because this is not the same studio that did the other games. It's not the same engine. It's an engine they've used for Dragon Age, but this is the first time they're using it for Mass Effect. And there obviously was a huge priority put on focusing on combat,
right? And not so much on character modeling, and not so much apparently
on the character animations. My final thoughts was I also found the ending of Mass Effect 3 to be intellectually and emotionally satisfying. More so the synthesis ending than the destroy ending. But I think that's mostly because I guess that I considered Shepard's negation of everybody else's agency to be less objectionable than shooting a bunch of people, which we did do. I think my only wish for this series is that I kind of wish that we could have gotten all the technical improvements that we got over the series while still retaining the original game's head writer. Because I did feel that the series got
directionality would be different.
It got a little pulpier, and it got a little bit more focus on melodrama, and a little bit away from a more cerebral classic Golden Age sci-fi, which I kind of felt the first one was a little bit more in that vein, and it kind of moved away, away from that a little bit.
A little more high school. Do you like her?
Yeah.
Do you like her moments?
Yeah.
No, not that, man. I don't mean the romance options or anything like that. I just mean that like every bit of personal conflict was dialed to 11.
Yeah.
All the time. Like your crew members are at each other's throats whenever there's a conflict. There's never any minor conflict. Every conflict that happens is major.
Mass Effect 2 is, it's the ship is the SSV daddy issues. They don't have any other motivation.
Yes. and that's something that really doesn't exist in the first game. In the first game, you've got the big themes like the genophage, and it set in motion all those things. And they did, I will give them full credit. They brought those themes home, right? They finished that stuff and they did justice to them. They really did. They also did it. They did a lot of the other stuff in a very pulpy manner. There was a significant shift in tone from the first game, whereas 2 and 3 are kind of more of as a piece. For Andromeda, again, I don't know. Like I've seen a lot of the early gameplay and themes, and I'm a little bit leery now. I'm hoping that there's something that goes on that will allay my fears about what they're doing. It does seem like they're very much focused on the combat. I'm not really sure where the story is going to go. I'll be interesting I'm hoping they're going to take it in a slightly different direction. That the beginning is kind of a misdirection, but I'm not sure about that yet.
Well, this has got to be a big setup, and the question is, what kind of a setup are they going to make to want people to sustain seeing the story unfold? That's my big thing, because I haven't really got a lot of that. And from a fundamental aspect, I really can't see how anybody in Andromeda is going to see us as anything but an invading force that must be stopped at all costs.
Definitely.
Please tell me how they're going to get around that, because if our roles were reversed, we'd be doing the same.
If you're wondering what it is that the game tries to do that hooks people into playing it, the answer to that question might very well be daddy issues, unfortunately. So I'm curious as to how they're A, going to explain that away, if at all, and B, where are they going to take it that is going to want people to be invested to continue on where they're going to be taking this story arc. Because obviously the Shepard one was big enough and wide enough and deep enough and interesting enough that they carried them through 3 titles.
The question is, can they do the same thing with Ryder, where we're going to want to see what's going to happen through the next game and the next game and the next game, if there is any.
I don't think anybody plans to make one game anymore.
Yeah.
or one movie anymore.
No, I don't think they do, and that's why I think this is the setup. This is Act 1. So the question is, what are they going to have to sustain it through 2 and 3 or 4 or 8 or whatever?
Thanks everybody for listening, and thanks to Jilly and Malagate for joining us for this.
Yes.
Mass Effect Andromeda will be launching this week, and we will be playing it in some shape or form. We haven't yet resolved what that'll be.
We certainly hope that you tune in to see it, whatever shape it does take place. So thank you, Jilly, so much for coming in.
Yeah, we may switch off. Maybe Blackstar will be playing. Maybe I'll be playing. I don't know.
Yep. And thanks for Mal for coming in and playing. I kind of feel bad that we didn't get a chance to do more Mass Effect multi. It certainly was enjoyable, and I think hopefully at some point maybe we'll be doing Andromeda multi instead.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Or
fingers
co-op.
crossed.
Co-op strikes.
Ooh.
Or both.
So many options.
Supposed to be going to be a thing. Yeah.
So thanks everyone for watching, and we certainly hope that you will join us on the next Mass Effect Andromeda series right here on rampancy.net. Thank you everyone for tuning in.
See you then.
Bye.